Join me in saying the pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And before you sit down, I'm going to point out we're having a little experiment in practicing with the CDC's recommendations. So as you can see, we're trying to be as spread out as possible. We're going to have to push Olivia down the end of the table. We would ask you all to practice a little social distancing. And if we need to sneeze or cough, we're going to use a tissue and we're going to put it in the trash. And there's no Purell by the front door or anything, but you know. So just basic CDC recommendations, common sense to keep ourselves well during the flu and other seasons. So, want to spread out a little? Feel free.
The water is,
Well, no,
the water
but
is
that's
really
an entirely
Purell.
separate issue. The water is not okay, but you know. And that brings us to the approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion on the minutes? Do I have a second? Do you have questions or comments? All in favor? Thank you. Thank you. Report of the superintendent, please.
Okay, so the report of the superintendent is simply that since our last meeting, we've had like 3 or 4 days. A lot has been spent on monitoring the coronavirus and our readiness. And so we've been updating the community on the things that we have been doing. And so just to let folks know that we're encouraging folks to just wash their hands in warm soapy water for 20 seconds or more. We have hand sanitizer dispensers that are on order. Fortunately, we were able to get that order in before the rush happened, so we're actually going to receive quite a bit of them throughout the schools. We have been, frequently cleaning touch surfaces. We're putting signage up around the schools. We purchased extra health supplies for all the health offices, disinfectant wipes, and sanitizing supplies. So as of right now, we are, still just cautiously monitoring where things are. All of the direction comes from the CDC and the Department of Health, and the ability to quarantine. That the ability to quarantine doesn't come from us. It comes from the governmental agencies. So we keep paying attention to what's happening here. And the best advice we can give folks is if you are sick, just please stay home and come back when you are well. So that's been a lot of our time over the past few days, and of course, budgeting. And we gave a tour to the realtors the other day, which was a lot of fun. So we had a group of realtors from one of the agencies around here who were interested in checking out our schools, and so Shelley and I got on a bus for a few hours and took them around, and it was they were very excited about what they were seeing in the schools, and very positive to bring that back to their to potential home buyers. Okay, that's what I've got.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Part of the SGO. Welcome back from Sports Night. We missed you.
So like you said, we had sports night this past Thursday, and it went very well. Everybody looked like they were having a great time, and surprisingly, the freshmen came through with an upset. They came in third place, and probably due to the fact that they won the dance. So that was really exciting to see, and we all had a really good time.
And today, the SGO got the order of socks in for the fundraiser, and we have them with us right now. Some of you just bought socks, very exciting. And also in the next few weeks coming up, the SGO will be meeting. We created like a council of people to revise the bylaws because they haven't been revised since around the early 2000s. So yeah, they need to be updated. So that's what we're going to be doing next week or the week after. So, yeah. Thank you.
Sounds very similar to what we have to do. Our policy review.
Yes.
All right, so there'll be some bargaining and,
I think you guys should set up a table back there, because you have a real, customer base right here.
by all means,
Yeah, so you'll bring those back the next meeting too, because I wouldn't have bought pizza for my kids on that day.
Peter,
don't have no
I'll spot you a few
I
bucks.
bought some. I'll just buy another. I'll buy another set the
I
next
know
time
where
they
you
come
live.
back. Yes, you do.
that's such a good idea.
Yeah, I'll swap you the socks with a thing of hand sanitizer. You can't get that anywhere.
Yeah. All right,
Okay.
hopefully they're wrapping up. We're gonna move on to the budget review.
Yes, we are. You're fine. You're fine.
Thank you.
Good night, guys.
All right, we'll all bring,
We need lady sizes. Oh, there are? Okay.
See you guys.
we're suckers, our socks.
Okay, so everybody's ready? All right. So we have what I thought we might do is go to the lines first, and then go back and have a review of our staffing, which is still very much in flux, and then we can have a discussion about our revenue and financing sources. Olivia, you ready? Okay. So if we go to D4647, those are our employee benefits.
Oh, it takes us a few minutes just to turn the pages. Okay.
Okay, so is everybody there? All right. So D46 and 47 comprise quite a large component of the budget. Altogether, it's almost $27 million. There is very little in here that we have any control over. It is our retirement system for the ERS, which covers the retirement benefits for non-certified employees, clerical and custodial. The TRS program for our certified staff, teachers, and administrators. That's the TRS. Social Security, workers' compensation, our life insurance program, our health insurance program, our unemployment insurance, and then if you move to page 47, it's you'll see funding for long and short-term disability and dental insurance. So this is actually calculated person by person with Holly and the business office. So they are actually, when we look at the backup, we actually go and we calculate everything one by one. Are there any questions or comments that we can? We're all yours. No, I'm not looking at your notes. I see notes, but I don't know what they say.
I had a couple questions. So we had a couple meetings ago had talked about revisiting and trying to shave a bit, which Olivia and Peter did. My question is, a lot of these lines are the one where there was just a little bit of shaving. The question is, those are the result of, I guess, there's some unknown in all of these. So this is a reducing the contingency amount, I guess is a way to put it.
First of all, we look at those positions that were eliminated and we took out the related benefits.
Okay, so these are
That was the
specifically,
first
again,
one.
related to the individuals.
Yes.
Okay,
That was the first shaving that we had to do.
okay,
And the second piece that we looked at is we looked at the projections again and see whether, you know, there was any related impact, because you have to be very careful here.
mm-hmm,
There are so many unknowns, especially with the health insurance.
because of the calendar year versus the
Yes,
school
the
year.
calendar year versus you can over budget, you can under budget, but you got to be very, very, very careful.
Okay, and then
And
the other question,
especially when the economy is not doing well, you have to be very careful, because there's a piece of the rate that they give us, which is they deflate the rate with their investment return.
mm-hmm,
And when the market starts going a little bit down south, it affects how much they return to school district, and it can be a sizable amount.
okay,
The investment is a presumed investment over a 20-year period. So when they do the actuarial calculation, in their calculation, they assume a rate of return of 6.5 or 7%. I forget what they use on this particular plan. I did read it. So the stock market performance, you know, is a long-term view. And if you look at it, that's why when people say when the stocks are high, so I mean, we've had a downturn in the market with the coronavirus just recently. But when you look at it for the number that we got last year, we underestimated it, and 2019 was a good year, but they're not basing it on 2019, they're basing it, and when they assessed this, they weren't really basing it on 2018, they were a year behind when they did the actuary evaluation.
I think what you're saying is very, very true for the pension piece, where they look at it over a longer haul. With the health insurance, it's more of a short-term thing, and because that is affected by, it's
Oh,
negotiated.
you're, okay, I thought
I'm
you were
talk-
talking about,
no.
I thought you were talking about the pension.
No, it's health insurance.
Okay, I
That
thought you were
one is
talking
more
about TRS,
short-term.
because I didn't think health insurance, you know, health insurance, the rates are already set.
Yes, health, actually,
Because they just went up January 1.
yes,
for all of
but
us.
we don't know what the rate will be for January 21.
2021, yes.
That's
You can
the one
assume it's
that's
gonna be
difficult.
higher.
Yes, yes, yes. I'm presuming that it will be higher. This year, it came out
It came
flat.
up, I'm surprised, because it went up for
Yeah.
everyone else substantially, because they put back in all the things that they had put on hold under the Family Leave Act. So I know that in the private sector and in the self-insured health funds, because I sit on some self-insured health funds, that we saw a dramatic increase this year, like 6-7% in some of them, 4 and 5% at least. It was but we had a big uptick this year.
that was one of the questions I was gonna build on was, in my business, FMLA is under the disability section.
Yes.
Is that where we put it as well? Because this disability line on top of page 47 has a multi-year increase
No,
where it's
this
public.
is- The FMLA is not in the disability.
Where-
line.
so where is-
That's the long-term disability.
So where's FMLA, or where's that calculated?
FMLA is taken, I don't think we are talking about this. FMLA doesn't, I don't know, I have to. read
FMLA is
that, but-
unpaid.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's not,
It's unpaid for the new state law.
yes, yes.
No, you're talking, you're talking about the state law that we got a couple of years ago about where
Yes.
employees make contributions for,
Yes, and
partial-
and there's
for
a
a
12-week
paid
period
family
for family leave.
Yeah, and it went up this year. It started in
Yeah.
it was in effect 2018.
And that's paid through our
It increased
disability.
in 2019, and this
they
year it's
were-
at the
they
maximum.
weren't
I
required
think it's
to do it unless,
847.
except through negotiation.
did.
The private
Okay.
employers had to immediately provide it.
Gotcha.
but If you have a union, it's negotiated or not.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on employee benefits before we move forward? Okay. All right, so if you look at page, if you go to the next section, there's a single page here on debt service. And so debt service are our principal and interest payments and where we budget for TAN interest. Are there any questions here? This is also where we do the transfer to capital project funding. So this is where the The roof in Glenwood Landing is funded from the middle school library air conditioning project, and the high school generator replacement is here.
I think I have a question.
Sure.
I don't know if I can remember it exactly. The TAN interest, when you use the 5 years past, expenses, we had we had this, the oldest number we see on our regular sheets is at 79,533. But that was a big jump up from 17, 18. Like
Correct.
prior to that,
Correct.
it cost half of what it costs now.
Yes.
I do not recall what created that shift. I was here, I should remember, but I
yes,
do not
in-
remember how it got so much higher.
Remember in December, around December of 18, that's when the Fed started increasing the interest rates. Yes, we did get a lot of interest revenue, but on the other hand,
But on this line, it went
we
up.
had to pay more. But overall, on balance, we earned more interest versus what we paid out.
Apparently, that's gonna shift again.
Yes.
And will that shifting affect those lower lines potentially in our favor with the new half-point cut and more to
It's-
come?
It's likely to affect our interest income.
For the tan line,
Well, it will go down.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, where we get the tax revenues
Mm-hmm.
and invest them on a short-term basis, it's likely to go down. You remember last year?
Sure, we
made
get less
close to
on bo- yeah.
$700,000
Yeah.
in
Yes.
interest income alone.
yes.
That was really very good, but I don't.
But my
think-
question was about these next lines with the cost of borrowing. Are these already baked in, or have we yet?
No, we are yet. We go in July.
Okay.
and Around July to September, when our cash flow is very low. We try to plan it so that it's not too long to save on interest income. We use our reserves. This is why the reserves are also very important. Sometimes we use the reserve
But the-
initially.
But that's for the tans.
Yes.
I'm talking about for the next couple lines, interest, debt, service in general.
Uh-huh.
That still, what percent of that has already been borrowed and has yet to be borrowed,
All the ones.
roughly?
All the ones you have here are on the debt schedule.
Okay.
They've already been borrowed.
Okay, gotcha.
They are existing debt.
So new debt at potentially lower rates is,
The idea here is when we get a new debt, we'll substitute it for the 1.2
okay,
that we have here.
gotcha, okay.
Yeah, just so the community knows what we're talking about, the tax anticipation notes are for funding before we get our taxes for meeting payrolls.
Exactly.
The debt service is the service we pay on capital projects. We are governed by state law as to when we take out the money and loan it. So if you have notes that are going for debt service, depending on the phasing, you could have different interest rates based upon when you borrow the money. So this is old debt from projects that we've already completed. It's not the debt for the upcoming bond projects because we haven't started those projects yet.
That is correct.
Just so, I
Yep.
know Dave knows, but the
That is-
community that may not.
That is
No.
absolutely correct.
That is well said.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, all right, so shifting back, if you go to the section A3, which is the business section of your budget book. And you look at page 6 of 24. Okay, so that's where we have our staffing chart at this point. And so in our budget presentation, initially, we laid out new staffing that we would be including in the budget, which was, let me just find that here.
It's
Moment.
also, it's also the next page
It's
in the
7.
narrative.
Okay. Say that, oh, it's in, there we go. Okay.
Page 7.
That's easier to see. All right, so if you look at what comprises the increases in the staffing for the teacher line. So we did add a contingent full-time classroom teacher to accommodate for any spikes of enrollment. It essentially, right now, we've got it sort of slotted for the Glen Head School, which is likely, if we were to need it, is likely where we will need it. Next page.
Yeah, I saw.
Oh,
I
I'm
know
sorry.
I'm looking at my own stuff.
Oh, okay.
We'll use a blue sheet on this, right? Because
We are supposed to have a blue sheet on this.
Yes, I put it in my board update.
All right.
Yeah.
Let's make copies of it and bring it the next
Sure.
meeting. No problem.
yeah, because there's been
Yeah, we've had some changes here.
Speaking of updates, do we have one that's like the budget now and the revenue going out the next few years? The one that looks like, yeah, the one that looked like this,
Do you want?
right?
Do you want to do that with staffing?
No, I'm just saying in general, when we're talking about updates, we need,
Oh, okay.
that's what we really need.
Okay. Okay. I'll make a note. You, Olivia, you making a note of that too?
Yeah, we
Okay.
have to exchange it.
All right, we'll get that to you.
Yeah.
Okay, so the Glen Head, back to where it was. So the Glen Head position, we have the one section going down that we're recommending for the rising first grade from 4 to 3 sections. We've added a 4th section to the rising 5th grade, and then we have the contingent position in case we have a spike in enrollment. So that is that. We also have the .4 math support position that's split among the 3 schools. A .7 E&L teacher for the middle school. That's we're supporting our E&L population. .4 in reading at the middle school. As we brought the STAR assessment up to the middle school, we're identifying more students who need support, and so this will enable us to do that. We've increased the dance. We're increasing the dance program. We're into a .1 elective at the middle school, and then another .2 at the high school. .2 for a music elective, .3 for E&L at the high school, and .4 for Mandarin due to increased enrollment and the program expanding up into the high school. And then lastly, a .3 FTE to expand the ILC from grades 6 and 7 to 6, 7, and 8. So those had gone away for a little while, and what we're finding is that we have kids who need extra support, and so we want to be able to give that to them without having them mandating that they go through the Regents program before they're quite ready. Okay. The other outside of that, we've increased, as we talked about, through the special ed program, we're increasing the full day ICT program, finishing that expansion to grades 4 and 5. So we've added 2 full-time teachers to accommodate for that. The second side of that is that we will be decreasing TAs as a result of that, and then we have a couple of teacher aides that 2 teacher aides that we need for incoming kindergartners that are coming through. So all in all, our staffing was 827.05 in 2019-20, and in 2020-21, the proposed staffing is 833.75. Any
Maybe
questions?
it's a little bit due to the update, and it's now 832.75.
832 point what?
75.
Thank you. 832.75. And that includes everybody, cafeteria workers. So, yes.
Another numbers question, on the description, the recreation assistants, are
Mhm.
they certified physical educators?
They are all certified, yes. Yeah. Okay. All right, very good. So thank you very much. And the last section on our budget review is the revenue and financing sources. So Olivia, take it away.
Yeah, I made changes to the calculation and I included that in your board update because when we reviewed the budget and made changes to it and we came up with a savings of $326,000 that it shifted how the tax levy amount will be. And if you look at it very closely, it aligns very closely. This was in your board update. If you look at it very closely, the difference is now it used to be 3.039. The levy to levy increase is now 3.034. And that is what I filed with the Controller's Office last week. Yeah.
You guys good? Okay.
I'm sorry I didn't bring copies.
We'll bring them the next time.
We're good.
Yeah,
We'll get it.
yeah, next time I'll bring them.
But I think the format we initially started looking at, right? The sheet that looks like that,
Mhm.
that lays out the use of revenue going into the future is very helpful
Okay,
for us.
I'll send copies tomorrow.
Thank you. Is that it on the budget?
I think so.
Any other questions?
Yes, I
on the
think so.
budget or follow-up items? Going once. Okay,
Okay, very good. Thank you.
they're good. Brings us to our discussion item B, which is how we use time.
Exactly. So, as you wrap up, I'm going to turn this over to Chris in a second. One of the core targets within our strategic plan in the teaching and learning pillar has to do with structural issues and how we actually use time. It is God bless you, of all the resources that we have, it is the most precious that we have, and we always feel like we have a need for more. And because of the way things are, for a number of reasons, our time is limited, mostly contractual. We have a 6-hour and 15-minute day for elementary, the elementary day, and a 6-hour and 50-minute day for the middle school and high school. And so we have each of the 3 areas of the system looking at how it is that we use time. Is it working in the way that we intended to work? And there is a lot of research out in the world on this particular topic. So to the extent that we can do this better, we would like to know how to do that. And in places where we're doing it well, because we have real clear instances in North Shore where we are using our time really well, and the schedule is really doing good things. To recognize that, not mess with it, and build on the strengths where it exists. So that said, I want to thank you all for being here tonight. I know you've done a lot of study and research, and imagine the monumental shift that shifting a high school schedule causes, just everywhere you look. So it's something that has to move at a glacial pace. So Dr. Z, why why don't you get us started?
Thank you so much,
You're
and I'm
welcome so
really
much.
excited to hear from our principals tonight. And designing a master schedule is such a key function of being a building leader. It has such a systemic impact of what's offered, the core experiences of students, and really the day-to-day life of students and faculty in the building. The buildings are in different places in their process and their exploration, but I do feel that the strategic plan has brought new energy and new motion to looking at more deeper restructuring of schedules than in the past, but it's something that the principals have always been working on. And while you'll hear differences in what the principals are talking to you about tonight in their particular buildings, I think you'll hear similar themes coming up K through 12. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Cousins, who's going to get us started this evening.
Okay. So I've mentioned several times in past presentations about our desire to look at how we use time. I'm going to set a little context by talking about the past. This all began with senior programs. Senior programs used to be something that we offered that in some cases, on some days, were a 3-period block. And by having that situated at the end of the day, it had some inherent schedule constraints. But what senior programs also revealed to us was the potential for deep, meaningful learning that needs to occur over a longer period of time. And we've kind of always, thought about all of those benefits. That's the little bit that's got us started in the very beginning. As we pursued this further, we started looking at just the tendencies of our students to try to pack it all in when their eyes are bigger than their stomachs, and they're like trying to pack up in everything, and they're not having a lunch. So one of the things that we've been trying to do is to see how we can develop a better organization of time and to afford a guarantee that students will have time to decompress and to have time to just be, as a guarantee, meaning not having a course that would run opposite of that. The other thing we've been looking at is how we can maintain individuality and customization and personalization in the programming. In a school of our size, we have many singleton courses, whether it's languages like Latin, French, computer science, business. A lot of courses, even our most advanced math and science courses, when there are single sections of that, become problematic with how they're placed in the schedule. So we're looking at, is there more flexibility? Right now, our students are forced to make many choices, and I think no matter how it is, because time is fixed, we'll have to make some choices. But we were really looking for what is out there that would give us the maximum flexibility and to have a broad program while keeping in mind the developmental needs of kids. The part that really pushed us over the edge in terms of the models that we looked at was, hold on, just because I want to make sure I keep moving through as I have limited time, was the feedback from students. So when we heard from alumni, when they went to college, they felt very well prepared academically. They felt very ready for the types of assignments. They felt very unprepared for how to use free time. And that's something that has become even more of a statement that the kids have recognized. They feel now that high school is so programmed, they're just going from place to place. They don't even have time to think about free time because they really had none in high school. And they really struggled with how to have effective study groups, just how to not waste time between courses when they have that extra block. So we have been doing some research. We continue to do more. We went to a really actually excellent workshop, and we looked at some models. We did site visits, both to our neighbors. Port Washington has probably the most popular model that a lot of schools go look at, but there's also a whole array of other things that are done that are very creative. We had a faculty meeting, I think now it's probably a year and a half ago, where we asked faculty members to reflect on the schedules that they interact with as a parent in their home districts, and also that they experienced as a student, just to kind of get the broadest array of some of those really interesting models. And then we followed those down those rabbit holes, and we got in touch with those schools. We got samples of all of that, and some schools, better than others, have a narrative about their experiences with that. So if you see, the basic principles that I already mentioned is the type of learning. Number one, how we use time, is it best suited for the type of learning that we expect for our students? Does it give the time to process, to explore, to have sustained engagement with the material? The nature of teaching and learning in our school has shifted, but time hasn't. We're still very much a traditional use of time. And is it flexible per the course? Does every course need the exact same number of minutes delivered in the exact number of ways? Because there are many models that you can customize more to the needs of the course, the needs of the students, of the frequency, and also the placement in that. The second one is the effective use of free but semi-structured time, and that's critical. The two models that we are kind of settling on both have a lunch period guaranteed for all. One model, it is a shorter lunch, 25 minutes or so, that is guaranteed in addition to all of the academic courses. The other model, which is becoming very popular in New Jersey, some schools in Westchester, and I know a lot of people are looking at it, has a community lunch in the middle of the day where you have a rotating, courses about 55 minutes long in the morning and also in the afternoon. It does present so many opportunities with the creative, and I can go into all the details of it, with the creative use of that time for teachers to be available to students, because no courses are scheduled during that time. So teachers are free, classrooms are free, students are free. And it is a task that schools with a larger population than ours have done quite effectively. And we do all of that with consideration about what we envision for our students' interactions with the adults in the system. It also provides flexibility for students to have shorter period, just courses that they may be interested in. So it could be a short course in some crafts, because crafts is an art form that is not taught in studio art anymore. Teachers could do that. There's a lot of examples of some coding experiences. Students may not be able to fit computer science, but they'd be able to have those experiences with teachers. There's just a tremendous amount of opportunities for that. It's also a way for the counseling department to have access to their students. So instead of hoping that a child has a period free, they're all free, so counselors are able to meet with a grade level at a time. We could even have more of an assured experience for all students coming into the high school as ninth graders and their interaction with their counselor to do some of those executive functioning opportunities. One other thing that's really important about time is it's not only time within a day, it's also how we look at time across a series of days. Currently we're on a 6-day cycle, and we often just do every other day, ACE courses, BDF courses. If you add up to an 8-day cycle, it provides you with an opportunity to have more flexibility with when you repeat that or when you offer that course over 8 days. I'll give more information to you with the particulars, but the bottom line is I'm trying to illustrate for you is that there are ways of using time that are more customizable and a better fit for the type of programming and the type of learning that we want for our students. So I mentioned all these. I won't repeat that. It just talks about the developmental readiness and all of how it matches of how we use time. The same thing about the accessibility of faculty members' internal support. So the writing center, the math center, in a schedule where all students are free in a common community lunch, you can have support centers in all academic disciplines that is available to students. And so we are able to help them understand that you have that time during the day. You don't have to worry about missing sports or all of the extracurriculars or even just things that they need to do outside of the day to access some of those internal supports that we do have for our students. And then also the idea of having fewer class meetings in a day is a way to minimize the potential for an overburdening of assignments being assigned on a particular day or exams being on a given particular day. And all the models that we're looking at, we're seeing about 6 54 to 55 minute blocks, so there are fewer meetings on any given day, which we think is just a healthier way for the students not to have so many ups and downs, getting ready and then closing down at the end of the period. We've done lots of professional learning, lots of investigation. The entire high school faculty have been in my office in small groups of about 8 to 10, and we've looked at some models, and we really started to identify some criteria, like what's most important to us. And overwhelmingly, the teacher's biggest concern is this a schedule that will promote students having downtime? Which I know may be a surprise for those of you who are high school parents because kids are very overburdened with the amount of work. We're concerned with that, and we really want to eliminate that whole fear of missing out. If you're sitting in the cafeteria and you just want to enjoy lunch, but you know the person, your friend, is taking an extra math class, kids do have anxiety about that. They do feel the pressure to take everything, to do everything. And so we're concerned about that, and we're trying to use time more creatively to help promote this value of having time to think and to be with yourself and to process. So that's been probably the single most the biggest driver for the faculty. The next step, this has now gone to shared decision. We're going to be having student focus groups, primarily with the students who are in 9th and 10th grade, as this is something that is a long term. This is a big shift to us to even undertake. It's something that we're very committed to. We do want to coordinate that with if there were to be any changes in any student management systems. We want to really be thoughtful about all of this, because changing time is something that you don't just do in isolation. We have to be mindful that we do have students who go to BOCES. We do have to be mindful that we have shared staff between other buildings, so it's not something that we can just do. But we've been very deep in with this work, and we're really excited about the possibilities for some really refreshed approaches. The faculty here is ready for a change. They're all really, truly enthusiastic about what is possible. So, thank you.
Hello, thanks for having me tonight. So I wanted to kind of echo some of the sentiments that you heard from Mr. Cousins, and certainly from the elementary principals who you'll hear from a little bit. The middle school is in a different place, I think, in terms of in the system compared to high school and elementary school. It's certainly not a shock to you that I think our school is phenomenal, right? You know that already. And one thing I really do love about our school, and I cannot take credit for it, this is the work of my predecessor and the faculty in the building. They've designed a really, really innovative master schedule. We frequently host other middle schools to our school to take a look at how we do use time. That said, we are always trying to improve and get better. So we're beginning to take a look at the structures that we have in place, and some questions are beginning to emerge, and I'll kind of take you through that tonight. One thing I do really like about the middle school is the flexibility that we give to certain courses. So to kind of walk you through a 3-year sequence in the middle school, the 4 teamed classes in 6th grade, math, science, social studies, and ELA, all rotate, depending on the day of the week, A day or B day, between 60 minutes and 40 minutes. We go even deeper, because research shows that optimal learning doesn't necessarily take place at the same time every single day. So for 6th graders, they might have math and science for 60 minutes every day, on A days in the morning, but then on B days, those 2 classes go to the afternoon, and the humanities courses, social studies and ELA, come to the morning. It provides teachers with another opportunity to see kids in a different light, like literally sunshine or as we get closer to the end of the day. I think that is a really powerful way that we explore kids' best interests and kids' best performance. In the 7th grade, we continue that 60-40 model with ELA and math. So on an A day, they might have 60 minutes of ELA and math. On a B day, they'll have 40 minutes of both of those classes, and then art takes the place of that remaining 40 minutes. 8th graders have 60 minutes every day, whether they're taking a Regents course or a course that will finish in a Regents in 9th grade. So that's for Math 8, Algebra, and Living Environment. Every single day, it is 60 minutes. There might be some middle schools or even high schools for lab courses like Earth Science or Living Environment or even Algebra that decide to do 80 minutes on one day and 40 minutes on another day. Best practice at the middle level suggests that 80 minutes is a very long time to keep a child's attention. So years ago, the decision was made to give that 80-40 difference and settle on 60. And it is working out, I would say it's working out well. Another real strength that I love about the middle school is, we are really committed to the teaming model. We do it very, very well. And teachers have any teacher who's on a team has a dedicated professional period or a team planning period. So any team of anywhere from 4 to 8 teachers on the team will have common planning time. So for example, the team 3 in 8th grade meets every single day first period, All those teachers share first period, and on Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays, they meet as an interdisciplinary team, and then on Tuesdays and Thursdays, they meet as a grade-wide department team. So the math teachers meet on Tuesdays, Thursdays, social studies teachers, etc. We're able to use that time to talk about kids, to have parent meetings, to plan assessments, to plan grade level activities, to reflect on practices and plan forward. We're also really proud of the incredibly rich and diverse menu of options that kids have at the middle school, and that is something that we want to preserve and continue. So when we are looking at scheduling options, that certainly comes to the forefront of our mind. So a few different questions have started to emerge, and Mr. Cousins talked about how he has really done a great job at bringing his faculty into these conversations. We're not there yet at the middle school, really looking at this on a faculty level. I've had conversations about the schedule with our 9 team leaders. So we have 1 teacher team leader per every team, so 3 in a grade, and we've started to look at this in our monthly meetings. And I've also started to look at this with our middle school curriculum directors, looking at the use of time. And this has actually been kind of an area of focus for the site-based committee. We have met over the last 2 or 3 months to create a survey, and actually we met today to finalize it, and all parents in the middle school will get that email, I think tomorrow afternoon with my Friday email. But these kind of 4 questions have emerged. A master schedule reveals a lot about a school's instructional priorities and values, right? So that's on our mind. What does our master schedule reveal about us? What does it say? What's that unwritten story? Where does it show that we place our priority? To what extent are all students able to access that rich diversity of courses? And I think this is a question or a theme that is emerging at the middle school. We love our electives. We love the rich diversity of classes that we have. And I also think that we do a good job at providing academic intervention services and other enrichment opportunities, and sometimes I feel like kids are like Stretch Armstrong and we're pulling at them in a variety of different ways. So I bring that up because they might be in a really awesome elective class that we have, and we frequently, however, use that time for an AIS math pullout class, or a speech service, or a music lesson, or an IEP counseling mandated session. So we have many students in our school, and it grows more and more every year, who might be on paper scheduled to be in an elective class 5 days a week, period 8, but might go there once that week because they have math AIS or whatever it might be. And that's something that we're really trying to grapple with. Parents want that experience and that exposure to their kids, and our kids want it too. We're also continuing that idea of true personalization and individualized learning. And again, I spoke about those academic pull-out classes. How can we ensure that those happen, but that they don't take away from the elective experience of our kids? I spoke a little bit about what we're doing in terms of feedback, right? So very kind of preliminarily discussing this with team leaders, talking about this as a middle school administration team, and working with our site-based committee. What I plan to do next year is kind of take the summer to analyze the survey results that parents will begin to give, and then work with the student government and students to hear their perspectives, and then begin conversations at a more broad, at a broader level, to involve more faculty, to hear what some of their concerns and ideas are. Some other questions that I have, one question I have that I think is really tied to the great and transformative work of the bond. We spoke earlier in the summer when you visited the middle school. We know that addition to the building is going to happen, and it's going to be so beautiful and great. So we're wondering if 4-minute passing time will be necessary anymore. And if 4 minutes of passing time is no longer necessary, maybe we try 3 minutes. We now have a found 10 minutes in our day. So similar to what Mr. Cousins said of, how do we provide unstructured time to kids, and how do they use that time for to be with themselves and to learn how to do time management? What would that look like for a school-wide brain break in the middle of the day, right? So instead of 4 minutes of passing, it's 3 minutes, and then somehow there's 10 minutes in the day to do something with. We're kind of exploring what that option might be. And finally, to what extent can a true flex period be used with perhaps a 6-day cycle, an 8-day cycle, so that we're not pulling kids from elective classes, but we provide to all kids in their day an opportunity for enrichment, clubs, AIS, all those different types of services that they might be getting pulled from right now. So I'm really excited about the very beginning stages of this work, and look forward to see what happens next. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. So at the elementary level, you would think that our schedule wouldn't be that complicated. But as Peter mentioned, we only have 6 hours and 15 minutes to really squeeze in a wealth of opportunities for our students. The elementary students really have such a great high-quality education compared to other elementary schools in the area. Along with the challenging academic curriculum, we give them opportunities to discover their strengths and really develop their own passions. So daily, they have academics, obviously. They have a 90-minute literacy block, a math block somewhere between 45 and 60 minutes, depending on the grade level, time for science and social studies. And in these academic areas, they're actively engaged in units of study, interactive lessons, research, and project-based learning. Every single day they have recess and lunch, and we have 50 minutes total for that. This year we've experimented a little bit with having the older kids have a little longer recess time because we find that they don't need as much time to eat. They'd rather socialize. The little kids, we've had to be flexible with that time. They do need the 25 minutes to eat. So then those are the two things that happen daily. Oh, those are the things that happen daily. We also have a 6-day cycle. So within the 6-day cycle, we have specials, and the specials are art, music, and phys ed. And for K-1-2, they have phys ed every other day, and then they either have art or general music. In grades 3, 4, 5, they have phys ed every other day, art, general music, and they can choose to take an instrument. If they don't take an instrument, they have a second session of general music. And 4th and 5th grade also have 40 minutes of chorus once in a 6-day cycle. So we are constantly rethinking. Every single summer, we're rethinking how we fit everything into the schedule. This past summer, we came up with the name Exploration and Enrichment, and we tried to block schedule that so that it was the same time of day for the classroom teacher. So in that Exploration and Enrichment block, we have the foreign language, which is twice in a 6-day cycle for 30 minutes. K-1-2 have Mandarin, 3, 4, 5 have Mandarin or Spanish. They choose the class. We have whole class enrichment, STEAM, counseling, and wellness. So all those things fit in a rotating cycle throughout the school year for the grade levels. Those classes really offer purposeful challenge. They help develop the social emotional well-being of the students. Our pull-out services and push-in services include the enrichment, intervention services, and then RTI support. And that's one of the things that we want to look a little more closely at. And every year, like I said, we really reflect every single summer. I've been here, this is my 15th year, and every summer we make changes to try to, make a better schedule for teachers and for children to meet their needs. Ms. Wojcik's going to explain our process this year.
So we really asked ourselves, what process have we used to explore how to best structure our time for academic special areas and support classes? So we've really just begun the process of collecting data to really make thoughtful and informed decisions about our scheduling moving forward. What we have begun with is an elementary school survey that we sent to all the teachers to gather data. And we asked the teachers to identify benefits and challenges of their current schedule. And we received 100% participation rate, which signifies the importance this is to the teachers with respect to their schedules for their students. Moving forward, we will be structuring the best way to meet with students to hear their point of view about their school day and the benefits and challenges that they come up against in a developmentally appropriate way that would span between K and 5th grade. We really spent some time analyzing the results, and within that analyzing of those results, it has produced some questions for consideration for us, and Dr. Rufa is going to speak a little bit about the themes that have emerged as we've explored the data collection.
So as we continue to focus on how to improve and develop our elementary schedule, we as not only the three of us, but all of the principals are committed to the social, emotional development of our students. So at the elementary level, we continue to look at ways that we can ensure our students have contact with our wellness teacher and counselor to support their well-being. Secondly, as Ms. Finder shared, we have a wealth of enriching educational opportunities for our students that go well beyond the traditional math and literacy blocks. So continuing to review those programs and making sure that they are both developmentally appropriate for all of our students at the various grade levels and balance and support our curricula. And lastly, to ensure that all of our students receive the personalized instruction and support that they need, looking at blocks of time that we can use to support our students' continued access to the curriculum, whether that means that they need additional interventions or further personalized instruction, so they're as successful as possible while they are working under our care and having access to our curriculum.
So thank you all very much, and it's been a pleasure really having these discussions together as a full principal group. You know, and going through it myself and speaking with the principals about it, it's clear that you're engineers, you know, and to some extent designing a master schedule is the ultimate STEM project. But unfortunately, it's a budget, and you can't create time like you can revenue. And so it presents challenges, and also there are competing perspectives. Somebody had mentioned that we're kind of working towards these 21st century learning goals, but we have a 20th century template that we're trying to redesign, and so that's the challenge. So thank you all.
Are there any questions from the board?
I would think there will be, surely. Thank you guys so much. That's extremely interesting. And so, yes, do you guys have questions?
I do. I have one. It's for the elementary teachers. I actually think your scheduling is the worst of all of them. It's most difficult because you're trying to get so much in such a short day, and you have all the intervention needs on top of it. So when we talk about STEAM, which I know is very popular, we're doing STEAM rooms, right? We're redoing the library. Those kind of programs, how often do the students get STEAM? And how often do they get access to the library? And I mean, we know the language is twice a 6-day cycle, but it's unclear to me as to the other alternating enrichment activities, how often they have access. So that works out to what, once every 6 weeks?
It happens, it's in module rotation.
Approximately.
The first module would happen 2 days in one 6-day cycle, and then 2 days in the next cycle. And then it wouldn't happen for a period of time. And then there'd be another 4-period module in the first.
She's saying the amount of time.
Yeah, I get it. It's not on a regular, it's done together as a unit. And it seems like there's one unit every quarter, approximately. Okay. So there's really not a great deal of time devoted to STEAM. It'd be like discrete projects then, yes? More or less? Right, but in terms of the rotating STEAM teachers that we've hired and the new STEAM facilities, well, they could be utilized, I guess, by general science as well. So the library, we've put money into the libraries in terms of books recently for the elementary students because we understand that they want actual physical books. We're renovating the libraries so they can have their smaller groups. How often do they have access to the libraries?
Sharing some ideas for next year as well. So this year, library, we do have a result from the survey, however, is that the way we've done it this year in terms of having many block of cycles, was felt by our teachers perhaps not to be the best way. They would put things on top of that, and they would prefer something more regular, so as we look ahead to next year, that's something we're taking into consideration.
Yeah, I would think that with the, with the Columbia's teachers model, which gives, you really want to give kids autonomy over what they're reading, rather than give them a book to read as a class, that access to the library would be a priority.
Yes, well, as I said, at least once every 6-day cycle, there is a book exchange for every class, so the children have the opportunity to get these books, so that was very
It's also important to remember that there's also tremendous collaboration that goes into both of the STEAM teacher in the classroom and the librarian in the classroom. One example of that is the work that Devin and Joe has done to develop a second grade version of a capstone project. And in that project, our students, for example, in second grade had choice in an animal that they wanted to research. They were leveraging their time, whether it was in the classroom, whether it was outside of the traditional English block model, to have additional access to the library to conduct that research, to then write a research paper development appropriate for second grade that really demonstrated their choice, their passion of the animal, and their beginning of understanding things. And in fact, Dr. Leonis, myself, Dr. Smythe, we were all invited to one of our second graders classes at Fleming Head, where they shared those findings with us. And it was a really great project and a great opportunity to see these young minds beginning to do their research due to the fact that they had access to the library.
I think we saw samples of that in your presentation. I remember seeing some of the animal research projects. I'm just trying to figure out how we get them to have more time for STEAM and for library, because I think it's, as you said, it's part of our learning model now, right? We're moving away to a more individualized model, so it's important that they have access to these opportunities.
On that note, I just did want to add, we do have a wide array of STEAM clubs during the day, and the module system does allow for choice in that regard. So students can come during recess and lunch for during the day clubs at each grade level.
And it's another way you use the facilities that we're talking about, too.
That's right.
Thank you.
Thank you. I wanted to ask a question too. Rob was talking about, I'm going to say, attention span issues, that like we had classes at the middle school that go up to 60 minutes, and that there were places that went as far as 80 minutes, but there was research that said for that age group, 80 minutes was really apparently pushing it, which seems very reasonable. So I was curious if what other thoughts on that were for younger kids and older kids, and because that seems like that would be, a significant limitation on what you could do with a schedule with how long kids can do something for. How long can a class be in the high school and still keep everybody's attention? Or how long can we, work on math when we're 6 and still hold it together,
I mean, we've done some research on that, and it really depends on the design of the lesson. So all of this is rethink how we design all that. The way that we're envisioning it now, there are actually some opportunities. Like right now we have science labs. Let's go about they have 80 minutes. So we're looking at providing the teachers flexibility to design instruction around different varying blocks. So maybe a 55-minute block. Then the one model that's kind of most appealing at this point, there is a time once per every 8 days where that science teacher will have 110 minutes uninterrupted time, which you need in some cases for the nature of that. So that's what the department will look at and match it with the design of the learning, that particular objective. But there's so much research to support how much kids can attend to, but it doesn't mean that it's a different course. It means the nature of instruction has to change within that overarching time. That's really what it really comes down to. There are no single numbers
Thank you.
Down this end.
And it's also, they're moving around a little bit as they're doing that too. It's not like you've got them.
Dr. Smythe and I observed a great fifth grade math lesson yesterday, and I can echo what Ms. Wojcik's saying in math as well, where they start off with a very short mini lesson, then they go into an anchor task where they're exploring, they're collaborating, then they're constantly moving. This happened to be in one of the new furniture rooms, and we could see how that layout was helping that as well. So looking at time and place and structure that way.
Right, so it's all, these dimensions, right, are complicated, right? That you're talking about what happens across the day, what happens across the cycle, and then even then you've still got to bust it up within the blocks. Someone else?
I think one of the themes that you all talked about, I think we all kind of get intuitively as parents and also people who are seeing this a lot, is there is a hunger for, in some way, somehow, just slowing this all down a little bit for the kids. They're getting, we have so many offerings for them, we're throwing so much at them, and it's great, and they're excited, and in many ways they're inspired by all these things, but it happens so much, and at such a blistering rate, that I'm not sure they always can get it. One of the questions I was going to ask tonight was about looking for that sweet spot of what the ideal time, but in reading your backup, there was a lot of data that talked about that's really different for different kids. And how to fit what that ideal time is within the construct of a public school that has to serve all, knowing that we have students with many different learning styles and speeds. I don't know if there's a way to accommodate that within the structure. I mean, Ms. Wojcik, you just talked about that a little bit, about having a class and having group lessons, that also having kids to some degree come out of it at their own rate, and whether there's enough flexibility to that. But again, the gears would have to be enlarged to slow it all down a little bit to make it go, I would think.
When you have a literacy block, let's say for 90 minutes or even 60 minutes, or math block for 60 minutes, I think that in part can help answer that, because within that 60 minutes, and our teachers, I think, have echoed that in the surveys, you can design within that in a way that meets students' needs. So that gives like some flexibility to work with the students that are in front of you. And we've also been talking about, you know, how the schedule should change. Maybe it looks different for K1, for 2, 3, and for 4, 5 versus we've always thought traditionally in terms of a K5 schedule. And there's so much rapid change that happens, even from K to 1, but certainly from K to 5, so much evolution. So that's a thought that the elementary team was articulating when we've been meeting.
We just, I don't know whether we're, whether it's a self-fulfilling prophecy where we put them in this track so young, where they're keeping track of what they're doing. And do I have my instrument, you know, in these really early grades? And then by the time they get to high school, it's really not a surprise that they want to be skipping lunch and having a second or third thing and staying late and doing so much, because they've sort of been trained by us to take as much as humanly possible. So even the idea of having that mandatory lunch, I like it a lot, but I also wonder if there's opportunities for all those other things, are they going to avail themselves of it, or are they still going to spend 90 seconds wolfing down a sandwich and then still trying to run off and do all those things, either because they're excited by the opportunity or they feel like you said, comparing themselves to everyone else, that they sort of have to, or this phantom goal of I need this or else I'm not going to be able to achieve my goals. I don't know how we push them to challenge themselves and do so much while also making them understand that's not necessary.
Well, we have to, go ahead.
Yeah.
One thing that's been very interesting in looking at that free time is finding that balance between not scheduling. Because it's very tempting to say, oh, this would be good for kids, this would be good for kids, let's have them all do this, and then over-scheduling them.
Yeah.
And having, you know, the important role of we need to teach students how to work obviously all of these things have to be worked out with all of the bargaining units in terms of how time is used or supervision, but we're really trying to envision this to have it be striking that balance between giving them the tools of how to more productively and in a more healthy way use that time, not just saying, here's your time, use, it's kind of giving them a phone or an iPad and say, figure it out. We're not looking at that model, we're looking at having these much more, not there would be a curriculum to it, but there would be emphasis using the counselors, using the social workers to help them, all of those important human characteristics that our vision is all about, that would be in there without it being overly like a course.
Essentially what I was going to say. So, thank you.
Thank you.
And you really want your runs to be below the other interesting factors that what Sarah was talking about at the time, because there's also a rotation that you can do, and when you rotate things throughout, when they interface, kind of like the middle school does in the morning and in the afternoon, you can also have that butt up against that community time to give you even more flexibility for how long or short something is. So there's a lot of creative things that are happening out there that I think can move us closer to a schedule that suits the bigger vision.
Thank you. I like that we're looking big. I think that's important.
Thank you for that. So interesting. What I love to see is these priorities. And this is something, and Bridget could attest to this, I sat in how many CSE meetings, K through 12. And when you get to a point where you're adding services for kids, where are we going to do it? And where are we going to do it? Where are we going to place these services in a day that we don't, it says right there very clearly in the bullet, ensure equitable access to curriculum by providing intervention services at times that minimize interruption. Parents are at these meetings and they're like, my child wants to take Mandarin, but he or she also needs the reading interventions. And I remember sitting with Bridget at so many meetings, we have the master schedule in front of us, and my head exploded. And I felt for this student. I'm like, he or she's going to miss this wonderful enrichment period because they have to go to speech. So I like that this is on the top of your list. How can we not interrupt the schedule for the kids so they have access to everything?
I want to stress too that in the survey there were two aspects of what we did. One is in the survey, one of the questions that we asked students about was we asked them to look at it from the perspective of students who experience pullout, and we asked what are the things that they're missing when they're out.
Right.
And then that became something that was guiding our schedule, as well as within the schools. We did some tracking of the students' time during the day to look at it from the experience of what it's like to be a kid. What does your day actually look like? And we were looking at the number of transitions. So as we continually refine our schedule, that is a priority that's very close to our heart, to make sure that a child doesn't have a day with too much transition and disruption of
Right.
coming and going, and to make sure that kids get, for example, the academic times that they need, that they are in their classes.
Right. Having worked in a middle school as a school social worker at one point, I remember getting a lot of flack from special area teachers when I had to take a student for mandated counseling. And it's mandated, it's on our IEP, and for better for this student, you want the student to be socially and emotionally healthy so they can go back to that classroom and engage the way they should. So it's so important to remember that there are kids who have different needs throughout the day. I just want to say something as a parent, that a few years ago my daughter took, she was in senior experience, I think it was with Mr. Perlis, and she thought that was the best part of her day because she had an extended period of time where they could talk about their reading. So it was ELA and social studies and how those interdisciplinary subjects intersected. And it gave them, I think they used every minute of those, was it 2.5 periods, Greg? It was phenomenal, and I was kind of sad to see that leave our schedule because I think it's so valuable. For a period of time when I was a student at the high school in 10th grade, I had a similar experience. I took Greek and Roman history and Greek and Roman literature, and those two teachers taught together at a certain periods during the week. I still remember to this day, which it informed my love of social studies and history and literature going together, that I'd love to see more of that if we can. if we can do that. And block scheduling may allow us to do it for at least certain groups of kids who would be attracted to that. I don't know if the IB program would allow that, or it might. It might very well do that if we're thinking so clearly out of the box for scheduling. So, thank you for taking so much time to investigate this.
Thank you. I think, I want to suggest too that, you know, as parents also thinking about time in even more dimensions, right? Because their day doesn't end when they leave here at all, right? Their day can go on for many, many more hours. And so how we think about kids' entire day, waking hours. And I think it ties into the school start time research, right? The stuff about like when kids are most to learn, when most able to learn things. And if that will be helpful if we look at those things. And then I think there are other parts of, Deborah's comment reminded me that there are other parts of the kids' days too, in terms of like just how they're moving through the building, right? Like it is often, right, you're talking about too many transitions, but even however many transitions you have, how hard it is to physically get from one end of the building to the other in the 3 minutes that you have or whatever you're allotted. Like you don't, how physically crowded you are, and to some extent some of the bond work will fix some problems, right? Just, there'll just be more room and you'll be able to move more easily. But I think there's probably stuff there too that would just decrease the amount of friction that exists in a kid's day, sort of like with the middle school when they got the 6th grade classrooms physically closer together, right? So it was just easier to understand where you were going, get there. And I think also the fact then that the adults were arranged in groups that correspond with the kids, gives you that coordination that we're all looking for so that kids don't get all their tests on the same day, right? All the big projects are due at the same time. So I think there's a lot about physical spaces that impact the experience of time too.
You sort of brought it up, and Lisa, when you're talking about the block scheduling and the community lunch, I mean, I think every child should have a lunch period. I never let my kids skip lunch. But when you're talking about how you're structuring it and the use of free time, are we now looking at a model where the kids are going to be given, especially at the high school I'm really talking about, in their junior and senior years, more of a syllabus where they're doing more independent work? Because, it's a double-edged sword. Maybe they're not in the classroom as much, like a more collegiate level, and they're doing more of the work independently, but I think we have to be careful if we do it that way about their other commitments, whether it be sports, whether it be music, whatever it is, clubs. So when we do this, are we looking at that kind of model?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just skeptical with, having AP, having IB, and seeing kids skipping their lunch, that they're actually going to, you're talking about a change in culture, because now these kids get crazy. I need these courses, that course, because I want to get into this school.
All of the models that
So 20 kids, right?
also students with special education services who required, but they still want to have a full high school experience. So we will present a full report on all of our events. But we are not seeking in any way to take away the opportunity for kids to take school.
We're just acknowledging the challenge. It's hard. They're
It's
also
hard.
very good at filling their lunch with homework,
Well,
right? There's
yeah,
like-
all sorts
right,
of
you know,
stuff.
They
Yeah.
just keep working, right? They just, you know. I don't know any personally, of course.
I didn't have one like that either.
Yeah, me neither.
Do you guys have any questions or anything? That's it. Everyone? We're left only with thank you again.
Yeah, thank you all very much. And have a good night.
I was going to say, and good luck, because this is tough. Policies.
Yes.
Yes, we're going to discuss policies. It's going to be fun. Thank you, guys. Good night. Okay. All right, we are moving on to policy review.
Okay, so we have,
I think comments from the public will take too long, though.
no, probably not. So we do have 4 policies to review as I talked to the board at our last meeting. Policy committee has been meeting. We've been going through the 6,000 policies, which are the financial policies. We had a first review of the first set of them at our last meeting. Those, we've incorporated the feedback from the board into those policies, and they are presented to the board for adoption this evening. We have a second set of policies tonight. They, we also held the auditing policies from the last meeting so that they were tied to the policies that we'll talk about tonight. And then those we'll present them to the board at the end of March on those. So, Olivia, I'm going to turn this, so we have four of these. We can take you through what the changes are, answer the board's questions, take your feedback, and then we will, like we did the last time, we'll make those edits and get them out to you right away for review.
Yeah, I relooked at some of these policies very carefully, and I want to bring your attention to 6700.
Olivia, I don't want to, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Let's take them in order.
Okay.
Okay, start with 6680, and then, because I know you have some feedback for the
Correct.
board on the purchasing.
Yes.
But, and we can take them in order, if you don't mind. Okay, 6680 is the internal audit function.
Yeah.
Were there any questions or comments on,
I had 2 things. The red line part, I think repeats the last 2 of the black lines. I don't see a difference. I think
Okay.
it's,
Personal or entities performing design shall report directly to the. Yeah, it does repeat it.
that's interesting.
so
We have to take the top one out.
I would do that.
Yeah.
In the middle of that last black paragraph too, it says the district may also use existing personnel to fulfill this function, but only if, et cetera. I'm not actually comfortable with that. I think you really do want the internal auditors to be. I know. I'm like, it's in the black, but, I think that would be an important change to make, is that it should be outside people reporting directly to the board.
I think that started when the internal audit function was included in the 5-point.
With the claims.
Correct.
Right.
They separated it, and at that time, there was the issue as to whether the claims or internal auditor can be, an employee of the district. So we went back and forth, and this part, they did say that it can be an employee. That's
Which
why
is
it was
possible, but now that
maintained.
we've got it separate and like
Yes,
claims
now
could
we
be-
have it separated.
I mean, I have no idea what the rest of the board thinks, but personally, I think we should strike it. I think this should be an outside person.
That gives it the independence, actually.
right? Because we're even concerned when we're interviewing, right? Like that, you know, even that the outside firm is as independent as possible.
So we'll take that
You
sentence.
guys are fine with that?
We'll take that sentence out. Okay. Anything else on 6680? Great.
I wanted to add these 6 more paragraphs now. I'm just
Okay. 6700 is purchasing, and this is where, Olivia, you wanted to to make a note, yeah?
On the exhibit, at the $6,700E.1. Several years ago, we had to review this because the changes that we made were the ones that were recommended by NISBA. But we found it to be extremely restrictive because it's saying that, you know, from $0 to $100, you don't need to request more quotation. But from 100 to 1,000, you've got to seek quotation before you purchase anything. That could be very, very restrictive. You $101, you have to go for quotation, and it can be time constraining for teachers when they have to do. That's why we change it from 0 to 2,999, and then from 3,000 to 4,999. And also, I would like it to be maintained, the same numbers to be maintained, because the switch will cost a lot of
this.
Yes.
The chart. That's
The chart.
exhibit. I normally love Redline, but I have to say I found this fantastically hard to read.
Correct. That's why I missed it the first time.
I don't necessarily quibble with that at the lower amount, $101, but moving the cap on the one that was capped below 10 to 20, that's a
Yeah.
range of notable expenditure
Mm-hmm.
that I thought.
Yeah, I noted it on the first page too, that at the beginning of the policy, right, that using the 20 and the 35.
That most of the purchases are between 0 and 2,999. And so if we cap it at $100, it's going to require everyone to be seeking quotation, and it's very time consuming for teachers in particular when they are doing their purchasing. So I would like it to be maintained at 0 to 2,999.
To
Yeah, I'm not-
$3,000, they would have discretion.
Yes,
They wouldn't have to get quotes.
yes.
Up to how? Up to 3.
Three.
It seems high to me.
Seems a little high.
Okay. So, do you want us to come back with
Let's
alternative
just, why don't you,
proposal?
let's talk about where the board is comfortable.
I mean, I think Olivia's statistic that you've got a whole lot of purchases that are in that. Were you saying in the 0 to 299 range, or the
Yes,
0
yes,
to
yes.
2,999?
And
Under
two-
300 is most of the purchases.
Correct. So if you tell a teacher, once it's $101, you have to go get quotation, they are spending a lot of time, looking for alternative quote. And we also have to know that this is in aggregate. So if a building, the sum of the building is all aggregated. So 3 teachers are buying the same thing, we have to consider it in total. So that 4th teacher who comes along will have to tell that teacher to go and get a quotation. And we have the back and forth going on in the business office.
I mean, in most purchases are going to be under 300, it seems. Like you wouldn't want to go over that is the upper limit if we're trying to just.
So we switch it to 300? That's fine.
I'm putting that out there as like a starting point to the board. If like, you know, the goal is to think about an amount of money that's reasonable and in a way that, you know, reduces friction about stuff that we're not
I think if we can
concerned
make
about.
it
It could be
a
200,
maximum
it
of
could be 250.
300 for each purchase, then it becomes easier on the teachers. Otherwise, the business office will be going back and forth and say, Betty knows that very well. They'll be telling you, every minute, go get a quotation. And it's very, very stressful on employees.
So, well, this is,
And you can't
so
even.
then you've got two overlapping issues, right? It's like, do you want to set the limit for individual purchases, or do you want to set it
Right.
at this other level? And if you set it at the individual purchase level, at least teachers know inherently ahead of time, you know whether or not you need to get a quote. You don't have to worry
Absolutely.
about what the other people were doing in the building. But then, I think you're probably bringing the number,
I can bring the number down.
you'd bring the
but
number
Make it individual
down
purchase.
if it's individual.
So what would the teachers be purchasing that is not covered at the beginning of the year? You wouldn't be talking about textbooks, right? Because that's already covered, right? So what kind of supplies are you talking about? Because depending on what you're buying, getting quotes is not really feasible.
Like, we have piles of stuff that we've
That's
gotten
the
bids for.
problem.
in
Right,
bids.
so like
And
I
then
think it would be helpful if we knew what kind of things they were
They buy.
buying.
They buy classroom books. They buy supplemental instructional materials all throughout the year, right? Workbooks or trade books or maybe some supplies for their classrooms. The quote thing, because we deal with it just in the central office on a much more limited scale, but when the quote, with the level so low, we have a hard time getting folks to even give us quotes sometimes.
Even for food.
Right.
Even for food, you know, if they are going to organize a function and they tell you, you know, to get food, we require quotation if it's going to go above $100. And if you go to the vendors, they will tell you, we give you the quotation, you don't buy from us. Why do we have to worry to give you the quotation? So you'll be going from one vendor to the other. And
There
it
also-
can be very
A lot of ways, though, that it's gotten much easier to get quotes at the same time, right? Like, my company's website is churning out quotes, literally thousands of quotes a day, because everybody has to get a quote before they get the purchase order.
But
you
no,
know?
food is different. The
Food is
food
different,
vendors are
but I'm just
very-
saying there's
it's
a
very difficult
vast
for
amount
them
of
to
stuff
wash
where-
their
I know
hands.
that from
Go
the
give you
PTO, yeah.
Yes, go give
Very
you the
hard.
quotation.
But I'm like,
It's-
I'm
it's very
thinking
hard.
we're buying, like, food is probably not the thing that, you know, we're doing all the
So
time.
can the board be comfortable with moving that from $100 to $300 on the individual purchases?
I'm fine with that.
Because currently there's no individual, it's not an individual purchase limit. It's adding various kinds of things together in ways that we're not totally following along.
Olivia, what is it right now?
It's, we change it to, if it's in aggregate under 2,999, you don't need a quotation. However.
But that's not
however,
what we
this is-
do.
No, however, what we do is that we look at all the purchases for food the whole year. If it exceeds $2,999 and Betty comes in and says, I want to order this food, we will tell her to go and get quotes. Right, Betty?
Right, because the exhibit is on purchase contracts, not purchases.
So Olivia, what is your recommendation based on the functioning of the best functioning of the business office with good controls and good use of time for our professional staff?
I would say we should leave it the way it is.
All right, but the board is saying no. So what is
Well,
what
when
is
you
your
say leave it the way it is, you mean the way it was first edited to
Yes,
be?
yes,
Not
before
the
it was
way-
edited.
You mean before it was edited?
So it's now at
I don't know if I
2,000, but it's an aggregate number,
It's an aggregate number.
right? So it doesn't make sense to me, because if you're taking, it could be an item for $100, or it could be an item for $3,000,
I think that,
basically. I think
wha-
that's what the board is struggling with.
Yes, I think
That's-
104, the municipal law says that we should consider it in aggregate. It calls for aggregate.
But
So
it
you-
doesn't have to be the aggregate, I think is the problem, Olivia.
Mhm.
The problem is we have no, the issue is, I don't think the board has a problem if it's $3,000 in the aggregate of $100 orders,
Mhm.
right? Or $300 orders. The problem
Right.
is, the language that's in here would allow someone to make a purchase of $3,000 of one item and not have to get a quote. I think that's the issue. So I think what you have to do to satisfy the concern that's been raised by the board is eliminate the aggregate and allow, you don't look at it as an aggregate number. So if Betty needs to order $150 worth of food because she's having tri-states in, that's $150, she doesn't have to get quotes. Then if we have the legislators in, and we have to order another $150, she wouldn't have to get a quote. I think that is kind of the way the board is looking at it. Am I correct? Am I misspeaking for people?
No, I think that's fair, but I think you're saying
Yes,
the law
I have
also
to,
overlays some other
yes,
requirement.
I have to research it further because general municipal law want you to consider
That is
similar items
in the
aggregate.
aggregate.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're saying you're constrained by the municipal law doing it the way the board would like it done?
Correct.
So I think the policy needs to go into that and explain that when purchasing in the aggregate, bang, 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 and when purchasing individually, bang, bang, bang.
I have to check with legal counsel.
All right,
then.
so
All right, so we'll,
Can I-
we'll come back to this, but it just seems to me this is another instance where municipal law makes no sense.
Yes.
That's all
I
I'm
mean,
saying.
I think they're trying to get at, I mean, there are, not our schools, but there are schools who absolutely take what's really one purchase and break it up into
Right.
six to
I get it.
You know.
To make
And
it,
schools
to
that
make
are on
it
the
look
phone all
at,
the time
you're right.
asking for sole source letters and, you know,
Right.
they're working.
So perhaps we should table this one for tonight. We have a policy committee meeting coming up on, I think it's next week. So let's set this one aside. Let's bring this back. And Olivia, I really need you to get this ready for the policy committee to review next week.
Okay.
I'm gonna
Okay.
mention a couple of other things. So like, I would ask, you know, the big numbers in the policy are this 20,000, and the 35,000 on the first page, right? And just like, what's the reasoning? Why are those the numbers,
What do you,
right?
oh, this here? Why are the general municipal law numbers the numbers?
Right, so, we could use lower numbers if we want to. It's like the law says, right, you can't go above that, I assume.
That
And we
is-
used to have lower numbers in a policy somewhere at some point, you know?
No, we used to have lower numbers before general municipal law was changed. It used
Okay.
to be
I get it now.
10,000, and they upped it. And the labor contract used to be 20,000, and they upped it to 35 because it was they realized it was very restricted. So they changed it themselves,
I
and
get
we
that.
changed ours too accordingly.
Like, we could have as restrictive a one as we wanted. Like, if we wanted to, we could say it's $1. I'm saying that would be insane, but
Yeah.
you could have.
We could.
And we previously did, based on this chart. I think
Right.
it's important for policy committee to review the smaller numbers and the question of aggregate versus individual purchasing. But I also want to look at the larger numbers. And as we get, it used to be that over 10,000, you had to do an RFP or a competitive bid. Now we're saying anything under 20 is a little more loose. That's something I
Yeah.
think they would like to look at
It's-
also.
Right, and for me, how many things this impacts is important.
Yeah.
You know, do a lot of contracts, right, fall in that gap between the 10 and the 20.
If we're buying $15,000 of books for a library, I think that should be something that should be pretty comprehensive.
Okay.
But then you get into the question of if you want certain books, how are you competitively bidding it? In other words, you may
Some
be
come from
buying
a certain
$30,000
publisher,
worth $30,000 worth of books, but what you want only comes from a certain publisher.
But I think that's flexible in the either
That's
best value
flexible
or in the,
because if that's a sole source, then you can go for it.
I mean, this gets
Or
down to
if
like,
it's-
we're
if-
allowed to pay more for locally sourced small farm milk
Oh
in
my
this, in this
No, but-
policy, so.
No, but that you have to make sure that you compare it. It doesn't mean that you can go to the locally sourced milk if it's more expensive than what you get on a bid. You still have to compare it to the bid and make sure that that is also very competitive. We get that sometimes because some people think because it's local, we have to buy it, but not necessarily so. You still have to do the comparison shopping to
Sure.
make sure that it's competitive before you.
Well, I was using it as an example of saying that if we did need to buy specialty books, and they're only available from one
That's a sole source.
publishing house, sole
That's a-
source.
That's allowed.
But if we're buying a copy of readily available books and you're buying up to a certain amount of money, yeah, you should go to, I'm not gonna name the places here on the mic, but we should go to all of the available purveyors of fine books and see which one is cheaper.
It just happens that most of them are on a bid, which makes it a lot easier, but it is unique items like not food and all those things that makes it a lot difficult. And sometimes it's because we need it and need it tomorrow.
Yeah.
I understand that. The aggregate issue is also tricky because
Yeah.
Yes.
I know this when when I buy from departments, I'll say this on the mic, if they need more than they're allowed to buy, they just buy the amount they're allowed to 3 times, and they get away, and they're still buying
You're
it.
not supposed to.
Well,
They're not
But
allowed to do
you
that.
see it, yeah.
it's up to them.
Yeah.
I'm taking a
Right.
sale, but still,
So we need
I'm
to,
on this side now.
yeah, so in our purchasing, we need to be able to have, we hear the board's concerns about, making sure there's competitive bidding and RFPs where they're appropriate. But we also need to have the policy be structured in such a way that it has some flexibility for us to be able to run the system in the way that,
So I would not only acknowledge that, but I would say that without being able to necessarily quantify it, there certainly is a number at which the cost of overly cumbersome regulations
Yeah.
defeats the purpose of the whole thing. So I
Absolutely.
certainly recognize that.
absolutely.
Right. And so, and that has a lot to do with like the volume of transactions
Yep,
and the price
absolutely.
point, right?
Yep.
Because, right, and to some extent, if it's teachers that are making the purchase, they're not, nobody wants them,
Right.
calling
Yep.
them town all day.
Yep. And so if the board is comfortable doing it this way, if you have comments on this specific policy that you'd like the policy committee to review, you could email them to me or to Olivia.
I'd rather do that in public than email it later, if it's
So-
okay.
Do you want to do that tonight, or do you want to do that when we bring it back? Either way is fine.
If we go ahead and do it now, we have a better chance of being done when you come back.
Great. All
I
right.
have a question
So
on
let's do
the
it then.
aggregate and on teachers' purchase. So when you're talking about junior prom, the senior fashion show, things of that nature, the club has their own account, right? And they're paying for it, but they can't buy directly. They have to do it through
At the
you. So
extra
does
class.
this fall into the same
Ask questions from the 12th.
cap? So I'm thinking of like the
Yes.
decoration. So do they then have to get a competitive bid on the stuff they're hanging in the hallways? Be-
It is very restricted.
So if, I don't know if any of you have been to the junior prom or done the setup. The decorations are extensive, and I can't imagine that they would, to competitive bid that out.
Unless, of course, it's a sole source, and most of them are sole sources, because, it's a unique setup. No two products are the same, so they become sole source.
And I know, like, last year they paid extra money for the for the paper that they hung in the hallway outside the gym because they hung fire retardant paper. So they paid more so that, you know, God forbid there was a problem, the paper wouldn't burn.
Once we get a sole source letter and we can attach it to the purchase order, we are fine. And most vendors do carry the sole source letter that they give us.
Let me throw out just, if you guys are gonna look at it again, I'm gonna throw out a few things. If we actually take sealed bids electronically, I think you might want to address how in the regulation, because that seems, hard to do. A sealed bid in a sealed envelope is one thing. To like get them electronically and
What page are you looking at?
the third page, the one that looks like this, I'm in the policy. In addition, the board authorizes the receipt of sealed bids for purchase contracts in electronic format pursuant to the provisions. It's right above the subhead exceptions to competitive bidding. So if we do that, I think we should lay that out or not do it, doesn't matter to me. The Iranian energy sector part is interesting.
Yeah, that's like a holdover from, I think, the Reagan years. I mean,
I'm
it's,
like-
I mean, why are we singling out Iran? We're gonna have so many enemies under the new
Oh, no,
regime.
that is a provision that, especially when it comes to labor contract construction, they check to make sure that they have the Iran divestiture signed and sealed.
It's the law.
It's the law.
It's a law, I know, but it's bizarre that
It-
you're
yeah, it's
singling
really
out
odd.
the
It
out. I
seems
mean, I
strange to me
understand like
That they're-
why it's
that
there.
It's just one thing, that they're not several of them or no.
Right,
it's-
like,
yeah.
why wouldn't you put, there's so many other countries we could, you know, put in there. Why is, you know,
Okay, I have a bigger question that the board would have to contemplate a little bit too, is that, there are a number of places in here where it says, you know, the district has to provide justification and documentation if we sort of, you know, don't take the lowest bid, et cetera, et cetera. I'm sort of interested there too, and it seems like if there's a big part of the policy that requires justification, it seems like there should be some corollary sort of reporting to the board when we've used the justification option rather than the, best price option.
I
And to some
think-
extent, we have that, like sometimes we have letters from John Hall that says, we opened all of these, this was the lowest, but we actually had to throw them out because of this, but I'm not
Yeah,
sure we
but
always get
usually it is always the lowest price, because when you go back to council and you ask to switch the vendor just because, you know, you've had issues with the vendor, once you've done business with them before, they are going to tell you to stick with that vendor. It's very difficult to
I
go-
absolutely understand that,
very,
but the
very
policy isn't about like whether it happens frequently or infrequently or why, it's about making sure the board understands when
Yeah.
it's happening.
Yeah, usually we go through the second step of checking with council before we will even do that, make that
And
decision.
every time you say
And
usually,
they-
I'm like,
and
the
they would say
board
no.
should know that,
Yes.
if council said yes. Do we use the title purchasing agent in the business office? Someone has that title?
Yes,
Okay. Who is it?
me and Janet Bidwell.
Okay. Is that part of the org meeting? Cause like we referred to
It
them.
is.
It is.
You've got a typo, I'll show it to you later. It also says that, you've scratched that the purchasing agent will meet with the board annually to review the district's procurement procedures.
I don't think we've ever
Yeah,
done
I
that.
think, no, that is when we do it at reorg, because at reorg, we present all the policies and the board readopt it. That's what they mean by that, when I read it, yes.
Okay. So if, I wanted just to make sure the board,
because you have to re-adopt the policy every year.
And that's still there. The district policies regarding the procurement process will be reviewed by the board at least annually, but you're not saying they're reviewed, you're saying they're
They will
readopted.
present it to be re-adopted.
Which is, so I don't know if you wanna say reviewed, because readopted seems
Wrote.
more, yeah. If that's all we're doing, that's what it should say. I think that's all I've got, I'm sorry to say.
Yeah,
Does someone
I have
else
one
have
more.
things on the purchasing regulations? Oh, I'm not saying I don't have stuff on the other policies.
The only thing I had was that, for insurance, it was listed as an RFP and other in one of those exhibits, one of those charts. I don't know if that's two different types of insurance and therefore they should be separated out by line, just so we're clear. In that exhibit again, the one we were talking about, the second line, insurance, there's an X under both RFP and other. And if we know what the two different ones are, we should probably,
It's because we have so many insurances.
okay,
That's why,
so we could just,
disability,
it's,
life insurance, health insurance.
We get one person to do it. I remember one entity, there's one insurance we had a question on last year, right? And there's only one place we can get it.
Oh, is that the Omni?
I think
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
on the-
okay, so there's so many of them, it doesn't need to be broken out any further.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Very difficult.
In the regulations about opening and recording bids, awarding contracts, the second paragraph, the one, which is the first paragraph we added, it's C in the regulation. The first red paragraph, where it says, in order to be considered a responsible bidder, entities must certify that they're not on, this list about the Iranian energy sector. The way that's phrased, it implies that that is the only thing you have to do to be considered responsible, and I don't think that's what we mean to say.
Let me check with the NISBA, but this were adopted from the NISBA
I-
policy. Let
I
me
didn't
check.
I
read
don't
it that
doubt that
way.
at all.
Yeah.
Oh, well, Marion didn't read that.
I
way,
did
then maybe
read it
it's
that
fine.
way. I thought it was bizarre, as I said, about Iran, but, being singled out, but I didn't read it that
As
way.
the
And then
only-
we all know how difficult it is to DQ a bidder.
Okay.
We've had that experience. There's a legal definition, I think, of what's responsible. We had that issue in construction steering, when we
Right,
didn't
so
want to
it seems
use a
like it should be-
contractor.
Because since it's not referenced anywhere else is what counts, but you're saying there is a legal definition.
There's a
Not
legal
to.
definition of it. Because we went through, when we had an issue with a bidder where we weren't sure that they had, the requisite experience, we
that
had to
was
go
the-
to legal counsel, and legal counsel said they had done at least one instance where they had done that type of work, even though that was not what they did.
Tennis court.
Yeah, I didn't want to mention names, but yeah, that would be it, and we had to take them.
Yeah.
There's, I don't know if there's like a quote legal definition, but there is definitely case law,
Oh.
yeah.
Anything else on the purchasing policy exhibit or regs? Payroll procedure then, 6,800? Nothing? It says the superintendent's gonna initiate periodic tests to verify the accuracy and appropriateness of the payroll. How often?
Yeah, that,
Seems like we should just say
the bus is.
how often we're gonna do it.
Yeah.
why don't we just do a quarterly?
That would be frequently. I would have settled for less, but there's probably some best practice. I have no idea what it is.
We can do a quarterly.
Whatever you like. Is there no regulation for payroll? I didn't look in our whole set to see if a regulation existed. Because it seems like there would be one, because it's the kind of thing where the internal auditors always say, you're good, you didn't do anything wrong, but we need you to physically sign it. And we need you to they've historically been very specific about
No, I don't think.
how
No, we don't.
they
I
want
think
it
there
handled.
We do not.
NISBA has regs on some stuff too, or just policies? I'm wondering if.
I don't know, Sarah.
I would think you might want one. I think you might, could, you know, as a way to document how you do it, is it something that, you know, the internal auditors look at frequently?
But the internal auditors also have their own, the external auditors and the internal auditors have their own procedure about payroll distribution. That they are supposed to do the testing at least once every year, which
On the
they do.
distribution?
Yes, fiscal distribution of checks. And we've talked about it, last year we talked
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
They were supposed to physically give out checks, but it's because of the payroll date, we had to find another date to have the check physical, because we take people from the business office, go sit in the building, they select one or two buildings, they sit there and distribute the check to make sure that the check is going to the individual who is on the payroll. We
No
do do that.
no direct deposit?
We do direct deposit, but the statement itself has to go to somebody. They have to physically sign
Even if
for
it's
it.
just the statement?
Yes. With an ID,
That sounds
driver's
fun.
license.
Everyone ha- I believe it.
Okay.
Other things? Disposal of district property? A gripping topic that's on many agendas.
Yes, it is. Any comments on that one?
No?
Okay, good.
They're good.
Okay, so we will make the edits to, so disposal of district property is okay as is. And payroll procedures will make the edit. We're gonna bring 6,700 back to the purchasing policy, back to policy committee on the 12th. Maybe perhaps we can get talk to Fraser Feldman about some model policies there so we can get this tied up. And then we'll make the edits for 6680.
The only thing I did have, I'm sorry, I missed it, I was looking for it, I couldn't find it, is on the regulation on the environmentally sensitive cleaning products. Listen, I'm all in favor of alternative cleaning, but when you've got the coronavirus, you know, you need a disinfectant.
That's all
I thought it
regulated
was a
by,
state- that's a
that's all
state
regulated
law.
by the state.
I don't know, I just think of those commercials where the woman says you want flowers or you want Clorox.
Well, we also need to follow the regulations.
But our environmentally sensitive natural products are like, the first ingredient's like hydrogen peroxide. I mean, it does kill germs, it is, you know, and it's not toxic sludge we found.
Listen, I
Under
use
the
I
cage
use
today.
my citrus cleaner all the time. If someone is sick, I get
It
out the
also has
Clorox.
orange oil. Yep.
Okay. All right, thank you.
All right. Comments from the public? Thank you.
I think you wore them out
Oh,
with
yeah.
the regs on.
What do you-
6,700.
I wanted
got
to,
anybody.
I also wanted to talk about 6741,
Oh, I'm sorry.
What are you talking about?
It's not here.
contracting for professional services. In the
6741.
6741.
Do we have that?
I don't have that. It's not
It
in
was
our
from the
list.
last set. We're approving it today.
Yeah.
That's up for adoption.
Yeah. Is it okay?
The district, on the last three paragraph, it says, the district will periodically, but not less frequently than every 3 years. It should be 5 years.
Sixty-seven forty-one. Last paragraph.
Last three.
I found the policy.
Where are you looking?
I'm looking where we have the numbers 1 to 6.
Yes.
The next paragraph, the district will periodically, but not less frequently than at least every 3 years,
Yeah.
should be 5 years, because that's the practice.
I thought the law allowed 5 years, but we wanted it to be 3.
That was a,
We
that was a
changed it.
change that you made at the last board meeting.
We discussed it at the last board meeting. We know our policy used to be 5, and that's what's allowable, but I think we had a discussion and said we wanted it to be 3.
Yes. At least 3.
Right, we don't have to do it in 3.
Right. Yeah, you made that change at the last meeting.
Everybody good with policies then? Okay, action item D is personnel. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Action item E is the adoption of policies. These are the policies that we reviewed last time, with the exception, as Peter pointed out, of 6600, 6615, 6660, that we're going to save until we're ready to approve 6680, because they're all the external, internal claims we'll approve all together. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Second? Second. Other questions or comments? All in favor? Thank you. Action item F is the acceptance of a number of generous donations. Do I have a motion? Second. Questions or comments? All in favor? Many thanks to our PTOs and to the Arts Angels. Action G is the approval of budget transfers. Do I have a motion? Is there a second? Questions?
I have a question.
Mhm.
On the architect fees for the foul ball netting, are we using the same fee structure that we're using on the bond for those fees that we're being charged?
You know, the board adopts a fee structure at the reorg meeting. We use those rates, not the bond rates. There are hourly rates.
Yeah, all of it.
Oh, they're hourly rates.
Yes.
Other questions? All in favor? Thank you. Action H is the approval of agreement with the Long Island Crisis Center for presentations to middle school students. Do I have a motion? Second?
Second.
Are there questions? Are these, given the price, I'm assuming these are large assemblies?
Yes.
I will express my concern that if not now, at some point in the near future, you might have concerns about assemblies.
We do, as we do right now.
But you want to do this? Or-
We want the contract, yes.
And when and where you schedule it might be a separate issue?
Yes.
I see what you're saying. Any other questions? Chris, do you want to say? Chris,
I was gonna
Chris
say-
is going.
Dan, Rob Dennis and I are working on this one. We'll speak with them about how we structure it.
Thank you. Any other questions? All in favor? Action I is the approval of health services contracts. Do I have a motion? Second? Second. All in favor? J is the approval of agreement with Fitzgerald's Driving School. Do I have a motion? Motion. Let's say that was the second. Questions?
Just
Is this-
curious. Oh, please.
I'm sorry, is this replacing a bell?
I don't think so. It
No,
said it
it's
was
for
adapt-
it's
Is
for
this for
adaptive.
adaptive driving? That's what I wanted
Yes.
to know. Was it a special subdivision that Bell did not do?
Correct.
That's what I couldn't discern from the
It
contract.
doesn't replace Bell.
So it's in addition to Bell?
Correct.
Okay.
Other questions? All in favor? K is the acceptance of the claims audit report. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Second? Questions?
Just curious, the Mark Isaacs that didn't have the
Yeah, me too.
contract, is that a first time we've, the name's not familiar to me. I don't know what they are, who they do. Oh, sorry. Who
Let's
they are
clear some
and what they
professional
do.
services contract at $1,500, let's say.
Sorry.
Right, it didn't have board approval. So Dave wanted to know if this was a service contract that we'd used before.
And if we've used them before, yeah.
I don't remember us using that.
Okay, I don't need the answer now, but.
What I want to know is if we're going to use them again, because then we should go ahead, we should get that, we should see that, because once we've used them and they're in your system, I don't have any reason to believe the board's ever going to get to see the contract, or the details, or the rate, or whatever it is.
No problem, we can get that.
Right.
In
It's
this-
number-
in
it's on
this
the
year,
claims
that's
audit
correct.
report.
Yep,
It's her number.
absolutely.
It's right.
Yep, I see
Okay.
it. I know what you mean.
I'm fine, but if we didn't see it,
No, I
just
had the
point it out, yeah.
same issue, yeah.
Okay.
That works.
Any other questions? All in favor? L is the approval of our IEPs. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Second? Public comment?
Oh, wait, the vote.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
All in favor? I'm starting to, you know. Space. Thank you, Dan. Comments from the public? And that brings us to old business.
I have old business.
Mhm.
I have actually two pieces of old business. I have the textbook manager.
Yes. Okay, so the, let me just, I didn't bring the hard copy, but I have it here. Chris, do you have that, it's probably easier to read on your email, right? Can you pull that up, please? Did you find it?
Okay, yes.
Thank you. Oh, you have it on your phone too, I'm sorry. I
Yeah,
thought you
sorry.
have your laptop.
I know my
I
laptop's not
apologize.
working. So this is what Sarah Lamar had sent me. High school student book manager stipend. Taking and keeping current an inventory of all textbooks, including novels, keeping the books stored in an orderly way and in an easily accessible location. Inspect books to assess damage and determine if a recommendation should be made that the book needs to be replaced due to excessive wear or damage. Use the hardware and software the district purchased to barcode each book and keep an electronic record of our collections, including quantity and location of each textbook. Ensure each book has the district stamp and book number on the inside cover of the first page of the book.
So you're gonna tell me that someone physically goes through the books like that? I don't believe that for 5 seconds. And if we're paying for a textbook management system, I just don't know why we need that. And that makes, and I don't think, as a practical matter, in my experience, that one person collected all the books at the high school, that the kids turned in their books to their teachers.
I thought it was saying, as new books come in, those still, someone has to barcode them, stamp them, distribute them.
All the text,
That
all,
seems,
there is that, yes, but there is also the inventorying of all the textbooks that we collect at the end of every year. That happens over the summer.
that you do an inventory.
Yes, every summer.
And one person physically does every book in the high school.
One person does that work, yes.
And then why do we need a textbook management system?
Well, we can talk about that,
This
you know,
textbook management system is for the private and parochial schools.
But we have a system here too. I mean, it does not make sense to me that we have one person going through every textbook. I mean, it in a day and age of computers, it
So we
certainly
can give-
makes absolutely no sense
Right, well,
to me.
I'm just saying, well, that's the thing, right? The computer management system, right, is based on these barcodes, so you have to have the both pieces of it. You have to actually barcode the stuff. I mean, that's what they're saying.
so we can, we'll go back and, if the board wants us to rethink the structure of this, we can certainly do that. But I would need some direction.
I don't know, Rich, what was your experience with the textbooks at the school? I don't mean to put you on the spot, but you're the only one here who has the inside information.
The experience I had was, we had the barcode system, it was never used. We never got formal reports back in terms of what the inventory was, because part of the checkout procedure for teachers is to provide inventory to the department heads. So that textbook inventory was actually done already.
Right.
And the books generally were stored in the classrooms. So, in all the years that I did this, I never signed off on the position, because I never had documentation or evidence that it was done, so the principal always did it.
Right.
So, it was done during the summer. I didn't really have anything to do with it beyond saying at the time, I'm not signing off on this.
And he could, and that's the principal continues to sign that time.
So that's my point. It's not there's no way there is one person who is
Right, so
collecting
I
every
think that-
textbook.
I do want to say that it's an enormous asset that we need to have an accurate inventory on, like, you know, we do have to keep track of this. We have to know, right, how old stuff is, the value of it, how many you have, you know, how you do it.
So we can certainly give a little thought to the structure and then come back to you.
I want to know if it's actually happening and what other districts do and how we're going to do this more efficiently and accurately. That's what I want to know.
This encompasses every building or just?
High school.
Just the high school.
Do they utilize textbooks in the middle school?
Yeah, sure.
So there's a whole building that we're not keeping track of.
Actually, there's 4
The book,
buildings
the
then.
textbook assets.
There was 4 buildings.
I mean, I'm concerned about keeping track of our assets, textbook assets.
And I think in the middle school and the elementary schools, it's the directors are the ones who are actively involved in doing that, for sure, yeah.
Well, great. We have all these directors that we're paying a lot of money who aren't teaching classes. Give them the job.
I don't see
Fine
an
by me.
inherent conflict between having both software and a person.
No, I'm not either. I think you should have software, but if you can have a person in charge, give it to the directors.
We'll take a look at the structure and bring back a recommendation for you, if that's okay.
That's fine.
You said you had a second one?
Yep. My second one is, I just wanted to mention, I thought maybe you would talk about it in your report of the superintendent, that we had our second stadium lights
Oh, yeah,
committee meeting.
thank you for that. I apologize. Yeah.
And we did have they did do a survey. They had done some surveys. The athletic department sent it out to the quadrant. And from the results that we have here, everyone has lights but us, it looks like.
It's about half the county.
But everyone who responded has lights, even much smaller and less fiscally sound districts have lights.
I don't know that speaks in their favor.
But
I don't know that.
I don't know, but it just seems that a lot of people have lights, and if you're talking about scheduling
Apparently, the
and
same
more
number have lights as
flexibility,
don't have lights.
and you talk about scheduling, flexibility of scheduling, I don't know, it seems to me,
Wait,
if you
ju-
want
I-
to start the day later,
I just
you
want to make
might
sure if
need
I'm
lights.
clear. Is it 50% of districts responded, or 50% of all districts in Nassau County have?
Percent of all the schools in Nassau County.
So this is obviously a question that hopefully should not reveal my skills in math, which I think are pretty strong.
They're 12.
But that means 50% do not have lights, is that what you're saying? Okay, thank you.
Well, the only ones that responded on this sheet, everyone, there's 12.
28.
12 responding. That,
That's the report of the committee.
right, but they sent it out. They said, this is who responded.
Right, so,
But anyway, but in any event, we had the meeting. The next thing we're looking at are the pros and cons of having the lights. I think I would say that from my impression of the meeting, there seems to be a strong desire to, on this committee, of the community members who are participating, in favor of the lights, and they would like, there will be a report, but, I think there's my impression was they were concerned about the timeline, if this was something we went forward with. So, they'll come back.
Where are they in their process, though?
I
Are
can
they still
speak to
doing
that.
research?
Yeah, I can
We're
speak to
doing
that.
research.
So each of the subgroups is working on a series of tasks. They did some initial research. They came back this month, reported out to each of their, did some more work within their subcommittees, and also reported out to the larger group. At our next committee meeting, which is scheduled for April, the committee will do the visits, will tie up their research, and the idea is that then they would make a more formal presentation of their research and findings to the full committee, and then we would take questions, figure out what needed to be done next, and then hopefully the goal is to have a final meeting in May where we would wrap everything up and our recommendations and a report and bring that all forward to the board for review and consideration.
But their opinions may still evolve as they research.
Totally.
things.
Yeah, totally. So I wouldn't, yes, absolutely. So we're still very much in the work, I would say we're very much in the work part of the, work and research part of it.
Well, yes, but I was just, my point being that if you're looking at the budget
Yeah.
and how you're financing, there is, amongst the committee at this point, there seems to be a concern about the timeline for doing lights if we were to do lights. Part of that
That's true.
timeline is going to be determined if we decide to proceed with how we fund it. We cannot fund it under the bond, right? We cannot fund it under this current budget because we will go over the 2% cap. There was some discussion at my table. I don't know that there is an understanding of maybe doing an addendum to the budget, that you can't do it as an addendum
Right.
to the budget because the tax levy is what counts.
I explained that to some folks.
And you're over
yeah.
the 2% cap. They sort of thought maybe we could do a separate resolution like you do on a bond, and we can't do it that way because you're still piercing the 2% cap. So the point is, they put it out to the quadrant, the survey, came back with quite a number of districts having lights. The concern, I think, that was expressed the other night is if we proceed, what that timeline would be.
Yeah.
And how we could possibly finance that. So part of what I think they're looking at, there were some districts, such as Cold Spring Harbor and Manhasset, who had some private financing
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
on those. And they're looking at private financing as well. But I wanted to bring it up at this point in time because we are working on a budget and we will be looking at fund balance. And we do have capital projects out there. And if you wanted to finance this through a additional capital reserve, we would need to do that now. If you're gonna have any, set up one on the ballot, if you have any hope of getting it funded and done in any proximity to this meeting. Because if you didn't, you would have to put it, establish the fund in this ballot in order to start funding it,
That's absolutely
right?
true.
So, my point is, we may not finish the work until May, but if there's a desire in the community, which there is I think the strong response of the community members who the number of volunteers we had, which was unusually high, that if this is something the board is seriously considering moving forward with, I'm not sure that May is the operative time to make that decision if you want to set up a special capital reserve as a means of funding this. Because I'm not really sure that the scope of the project, the lights themselves are not astronomically expensive. Putting the lighting on the field is probably in around 800,000, but when you put in all the ancillary work, you're at, I think Stu told us around our estimate of 1.3 million, you said?
Yeah, between
Because
1.2
you have to
and
light,
1.3.
you can't just light the field, you have to put in lighting to get to the field, right?
Correct.
So all that extra work, plus, if you're getting a quote for 800,000, that doesn't include all our soft costs, legal fees, architect fees, engineering fees, anything that, a bidder is not gonna take the responsibility if we open up the ground and we find out what we thought and what was drawn was in the ground is not. So.
Stu's
so the-
estimate includes
But Stu's estimate includes that, that's my point.
So is 1.3 the number we should have in our heads?
That's,
I think it's,
Yeah, I think so,
So-
right?
It's over $1 million.
It's a lot of money.
Even at this point, to have something on the ballot seems very difficult.
What,
But I think the issue
I'd like
moreover
to, I'd like
is-
to time out here, okay? One of the things that I think is so critical in solving this problem is that we deal with all of the issues that it presents up front, that there's a plan, there's an agreement with people, usage agreement, and so on. So we ought to just,
Before we ask them to
we've had
vote.
2 meetings. There were lots of issues that are brought up in my group, which is impact on student learning and what have you. There are sound issues. There are so many issues that to suggest that we should push this forward, I think, is a major mistake. I don't know if we can make I don't know how many members who are on the group.
46.
And out of that, community members are what?
I mean, a good number of them.
Half?
Yeah, about half. Maybe not half, but a good number.
Okay.
Yeah.
I hear some trepidation from community members on those committees. So I just think that we're going to do this and not deal with any of the issues, and this is going to blow up in our face. I promise you. One of the things that I think that we can do that would facilitate moving this along, and I mentioned this to John tonight, is one of the critical issues is the sound that
Yes.
comes from every activity that you will have on that field. And I think one of the things that we can do as we're working is to figure out a way to create sound production where it comes back at the school rather than out into the community. Because it's a major issue for people to hear at 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning or at 10 o'clock on a Friday night. And you've got people that are right on the other side of the tracks
Yeah, no, I get calls
there.
on the sound more than.
So I
more
think,
than
I
anything
think
else, yes.
one of the things that we can push forward on is resolving that issue. And I think if we really want to know what our community feels about this, we ought to take a vote and see how our community feels about it. I don't think we should be making assumptions about, we had a bond discussion, we had a discussion about, when we were in here that one night, about adding money, and we talked about air conditioning and what have you. We put that off. We had 4 people come to a board meeting, and I respected every single one of those opinions. But I think we're starting to spin our wheels on this way too fast. You have a lot of things that you've got to work out.
I happen to agree with you.
That's
Right, I'm running the task force.
my input there.
Yeah.
Have it all
If I,
together, it's hard to tell
if I
if you're
could
right
just
on the ballot.
comment, I think I don't want to speak for Marianne, but by creating a capital reserve, it gives us the option, it gives us the flexibility. It doesn't mean you have to fund the capital reserve just because you create it, but it gives the opportunity, if the committee does make that decision, and we, with our community survey, we're putting together a survey that's going out to the community, and they come back and say overwhelmingly this is something we want to do, then creating a capital reserve would give us the option of doing that. But it's not just because you create it doesn't mean you have to fund it. It doesn't mean you have to put in the stadium lighting. It just gives you flexibility.
That was my point.
That is
Thank
true,
you.
but I also don't know how to talk to voters about it, right? Like, if you vote for this, then we may or may not do it.
I mean, how many times do you use that facility? Who gets to use the facility? How late at night is it? If you
I'm
open
saying
it up,
you're
our
on-
community group's gonna, there are just too many things to sort through. I agree with what Tim just said. We ought to prepare, but I think we are far from making an assumption about what is best.
Well,
for
if
them.
you
Which
put
is why I'm
it,
saying I don't know
if
how
you
to
put
talk
it,
to people
but if
about
you
it
put
on
a
the ballot.
reserve on the ballot, a special reserve, isn't that a way of getting a vote in the community? Because if they vote for the capital reserve, then there is an
it's
indication that they,
specifically focused on that, yeah.
they want it, right? If they vote it down, then you know your community does not want the lights. I would say that's a way more accurate way of knowing what the community wants than just a survey. All I'm saying, and wait, just let me finish. All I'm saying is what Tim was saying is that you're talking about a lot of money to do this, right? And I'm talking about, if this is the way you're going, how are you going to finance it and what the time frame is? There are people in that group who actually said to me they thought the stadium lighting was included in the bond and were shocked when it was not. They were shocked when they were told it is at least 2 years away from being constructed. And I think that is really optimistic, even 2 years, because I don't know where you're coming up with $1.3 million in 2 years to fund it.
And-
So I'm just talking to you as a practical matter. If you have this committee out there and it comes back that they want stadium lighting, and you tell them, that's great, but we don't have the money, or it's going to be 5 years down the road, you're going to have people who are going to be very angry and feel like they wasted their time. So that is all I'm saying to you, that if we don't think about this now, right? If we don't think about this now, you may be foreclosing us from having an option to set aside funds to do this, especially looking at the long-term projections. That's all I'm saying to you, because you're not going to come up with $1.3 million in fund balance in a year that you're going to use to do this.
And that brings up the issue of the budget that we're looking at takes enormous amounts of money out of our reserve funds, right? And so that's the trade-off, is you're just gonna be drawing them down instead of using, right, fund balance to put anything back, is the other part of it. But it's hard to know.
So I think it's probably, if I can just jump in here for a second, right? So I think it's important to give the committee the space to do its work. And I don't think the committee is ready to make a formal recommendation yet. I think there is still more work and research that needs to be done related to all of the issues that we talked about here tonight. Do I think there is a lean? Yes, I do. Right, I think there is a lot of community support for the lighting, but I think there are also a lot of issues that we need to compensate for, if that is to move forward. So I would just like to, I think I don't disagree with really anything that anybody has said here tonight. I just, I wouldn't want the board, right, because of the board has asked for the committee to do this research for you, right? And so the committee is doing that research and working diligently. And so I would just, as much as I agree, I might caution the board about getting ahead of the committee in the same way that I caution the committee about getting ahead of the board, right? So does that make sense? Right, so I mean, if you want to establish a cap reserve, I think you can establish a cap reserve. And if you wanted to structure that to fund future projects in the world of athletics, I mean, obviously that would have to be worded much more specifically and elegantly. You could certainly do that. I think the timing is tight in order to make that happen, because the legal notice has to be approved in very short order. Yeah.
And I don't understand how we're gonna put something on the ballot, but then talk to people about it in an incredibly open-ended and vague way. The committee may or may not recommend it, then we may or may not be able to fund it. I was like, how? I don't know how to communicate that to people in a way that's.
I'd like to
how we were honest.
I just would like to reiterate, I am not making a statement about stadium lights. My concern is the process,
I understand your concern.
period. I'm an athletic person. It's about process.
Yeah.
So I haven't attended these meetings, so I'm here listening. I guess my first question would be, like the bond, are we tied to having this vote with our budget vote if we were going to establish a capital reserve?
No.
No.
So theoretically, we could have a standalone vote
Yep. Be very
at-
expensive.
at any point. Second of all, I understand what you're saying about the committee, but I think it also stands to reason, based on what you've been saying, that the committee is formed by a lot of folks, many of whom are supportive of this. So I think one of the things that we wanted to learn from the committee was the nuts and bolts of the details of putting in lights, what that would entail, what that would cost, what impact that would have. But I'm not sure that, I think we need to be careful about distinguishing what the community wants and what the committee wants and how we go about getting that. So a survey is certainly important. Certainly, at the very least, having a public forum, people have the opportunity to come and speak to us. It'd be something that I'd be looking to hear in the way we did with the bond. Even if people don't show up, people don't show up. But I think it's important to give people that opportunity, because I am interested in learning what the community wants. There are certainly members of any community who will say, I want a 40,000 person stadium, and some people who would say close the athletic program entirely. We're not looking for individual points. We're looking for the voice of the community to come through. And I think that can only happen once we have the information the committee is gathering.
And there's some hope too that the committee's gonna be able to sort of educate the public on the ways that, this can be done better, right? Or sophisticated ways to do it.
So the survey has, there is a group, there's a subgroup of the committee who is tasked with developing a survey and doing community engagement and outreach. And so they developed their initial survey. In fact, Tim, you're on that subcommittee, right?
Right.
So they've developed some items. They're working together to tweak those. We asked the larger committee for some feedback on information that we'd want to know through the survey. And I said that I would put that out to the whole community, and then we'll publicize that, as we need to publicize that. And then we'll get that information back, and the committee will talk about it. But when, I think it was Mary Ann when we were there the other night, suggested that there can be some kind of public presentation to the board. And I think that is a really good idea for us to do when we're ready, when we're ready to do it.
I think, Mary Ann, your point is very well taken. It's really unfair for us to ask members of the community to give us their time and their effort, and based on what they've spoken to us about so far, a lot of their heart and soul on this issue, if it's not realistic at all. And I think that we need to start having those conversations and see those conversations about a 7-digit expenditure in the context of everything else that we're talking about, and seeing how that fits in. And that whether or not we as a board think lights is the way to go based on what we eventually decide, how to pay for it is a separate and hugely relevant issue.
Right.
Tim has something.
Yeah, I mean, establishing a capital reserve does not in any way interfere with that process. It just gives you flexibility without having to spend $25,000 on a separate vote or whatever the cost of a separate vote would be. And it doesn't affect the process.
That makes sense, but I'm also sensitive to what Sarah's talking about, which is that our role is making these decisions, but also helping educate the community about what's going on. And so saying to the community, this establishes the opportunity to set aside monies for something we may decide we want to do, but we don't know yet, is inherently confusing.
I don't know, you did it on the bond. You said, we'll have $40 million, but if the world comes crashing down, well, we don't have to spend it. And you didn't tell them how you weren't going to spend it. I mean, it just seems to me that this whole thing, we didn't give due consideration to lights on the field in the bond. We didn't have any discussion about it until July. And then it was given to us as either lights on the field or more air conditioning. We didn't look at taking out any other project. And I felt that it was put in there in July because there was some community pressure about lights on the field. Now you've sort of, you got the bond passed, and we try to quiet the noise to get the bond passed by promising this committee. So now we've done this committee, but basically you're telling these people that this committee, that you're not looking at means of funding it, their decision, if their decision is to go forward. So to me, you're going to just anger people and make them feel like you've wasted their time by not giving them flexibility, by not providing a flexible means of financing this project should you wish to proceed with it.
I was actually looking at it the opposite way too, that you get in front of the committee and it gets voted down. And then what do we do?
Well, then we'll have to look at alternatives.
Well, but then you've got
Was
a
this-
community vote saying no. I mean, that's a.
Well, then you, then if you don't want,
position to be in when given time, you know.
how many
to
times
work
has
it
a
out.
resolution failed to establish a reserve? Never.
Am I correct in assuming that the stadium lighting was discussed during the bond discussions?
Oh.
So the stadium,
I mean, this was during the months and months of bond meetings. This was not a discussion?
Nope.
No.
Not in construction steering. It was never a discussion until July.
that's not true.
It was on there, but we didn't ever really talk about it.
That was not true.
It is true.
Okay.
You're saying it was all in the initial
It was always in the
thing,
plan.
But it was never discussed or presented in the detail that was discussed and presented on the other projects. When you had the architects here in this room, in this building, on the several times they were here, not once did we look at the field lighting until July. That is a statement. I don't remember ever discussing the field lighting and construction steering. It was on a list as one of the possibilities, along with 20 million other possibilities that was eliminated. There was never a serious discussion about it, and at the last minute, it was in July, oh, well, maybe we'll put it in as an alternate. That's exactly how it happened.
My memory of it is generally similar. I would simply add that we as a board did not bring it up or introduce it as a priority. We as a board did not decide that it was something we wanted to include in there. And we as a board put forth a bond that the community approved. Stadium lighting certainly came to prominence much later as a result of community coming and speaking to us about it. But that was well after the bond was noticed and we were already on a path.
So here we are.
I think Lisa had something to say. I have something to say too.
No, I was just going to concur, and I wasn't on bond steering, so a lot of the details of what went on in that, I'm, not privy to. But my recollection was the stadium lights came into consciousness for me was in July, and I have a pretty good memory.
And to me, it just goes back to the whole process of the bond that I have a whole issue with about how it was formed and how it was done. I think we never saw the results of the survey. I don't know how many people responded. But it's done. But all I'm saying to you is that I think you're going to have this group with a demand for these lights in the field. And you need to start thinking about, if that happens, how are we going to fund it? That's all I'm saying to you. One option to do it in the capital reserve. I don't know how else you're gonna come up with $1.3 million. I don't. If you can give me another alternative to finance, I'm all
Establishing that
yours.
capital fund would be for a specific reason? We would
They
name that?
always have to be.
They always have to be-
Specific, you always have to name the project.
Well, okay. I'm
Well,
sorry?
The concern, Oh.
Right.
Oh, just the vote
To
to take the
fund
money
it.
out has to be
Right.
project specific. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Clarify, so we can be general in the creation of it, and we have to be specific in the withdrawal from it once it's funded, but no other action in between, other than
Right.
the funding of it through fund balance or other means.
I'm not comfortable with it being a very general.
Neither am
I
I.
think that's less than transparent to our community. Less than transparent.
And it sets up, a whole perception issue.
Yes, and, you know, it foments distrust. And it also would set up an expectation that I don't think we're ready to commit to without all of the information presented to us from the committee.
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
It's well said.
Well, I think you've set up an expectation for these people by setting up this committee. That's all I'm saying. I'm just preparing you for it.
I think that might be, but that doesn't mean that we should proceed.
And again, I would say that I see our role as informing the community about where we are. And it's not about responding to them wanting something necessarily, whether it's lights or a new theater or whatever else it is, but about being transparent and explaining where we are with this. And where we are is that we really are very early in the process. You've had 2 meetings, of which this is not a discussion topic. We have no backup. This is old business that we're getting all this new information, pricing, costing, surveys that has not been presented to us in any kind of way. I don't think this
They
is a
haven't
process.
been administered yet.
I mean, even having this discussion as part of old business is,
You need to think about how you're gonna finance this if there's a demand in the community. That's what I'm saying. Giving you an option.
that makes sense. That makes sense.
Majority of the board doesn't wanna pursue that option, that's fine, but I really think this creation of this committee has set up an unrealistic expectation. I don't think the committee members had an understanding of how long this process would take and how far down the road stadium lighting would be. And the further we get down the road, the less likely it is gonna be to happen because we know what's gonna happen in the future financially for us.
Well, that's another issue for the community to deal with. You know, in a year or two, we're gonna spend another 1.3, and you've got those increases from LIPA. As one of 2 retired people sitting up here, that kind of freaks me out, you know. It's an issue. I'm not saying it's one way or another, it's an issue.
Just in terms of procedures, I just want to be clear. If we were going to create a capital reserve, we'd have to vote on it at our next meeting.
Yes, I think you would.
So I don't see how we do that now, having had no discussion about it and the implications of that at all.
Right.
That's-
Not like an agenda item.
I mean, going from an old business discussion to actually creating a $1.3 million capital reserve, that we have not discussed that concept at all. We just got through a bond, and we're facing other financial pressures. That
I would
seems,
say the capital reserve should be bigger and more general, but to replace the existing capital reserve. So you have that flexibility to do projects in the future. I think it's something we should think about, if not for this year, then for next year. We need to have that discussion. How are you gonna fund these projects long-term after the bond, outside of the bond?
I agree with that completely.
That, yes, absolutely.
Yes.
And if you could do it in a more general manner and even do it this year, that would be helpful to give you flexibility. Because if you don't do it this year, then you're gonna have to do it next year. Right?
Yes,
And then
yes.
anything you've put, and when you do it next year, you're talking about not doing anything for another 2 years outside of what's in the bond work, for anything that comes up. Whether it's stadium lighting or whether it's something else. Other than in your budget, and you know you're gonna have budgetary restraints already.
That's true.
I mean, we already do, we're funding the budget through that.
And, but also similar to the bond work. I mean, we voted for a bond in 2019, and we're gonna do work, much of it, 2021, 22, 23. I mean, I happen to open up my folder, and I turned in this new piece of woven product that I made like 3 weeks ago, and I just got a contract for it yesterday. But that's not how schools work. It's just a very long process, and I think,
And you're going, listen.
I agree with you,
Now,
people
you're
are gonna be
You're
upset.
going to have, there were a million projects that we did not include in that bond that people needed and wanted. You're gonna have to figure out a way eventually of funding those projects. So all I'm saying to you is, if you want to at some point include what we did not include in the bond, one of which would be stadium lighting, that we should be thinking about, how are you going to fund those projects? If you could do something, such as set up a capital reserve in the next budget vote, or even the budget vote thereafter, we need to be doing that. And it's interesting that we could get more general language than I think we were under the impression we could get,
I agree with that.
Yes.
right?
Right,
And that's
Yes.
something
And
you
to do it
really
in-
have to be
nonetheless,
thinking about.
yes. And now
Because
that
there
we
is
know
not
that-
gonna be extra money in the budget like we did in prior years when we weren't using the interest. So the money that we used to use for payment of interest and principal, when we didn't have an existing bond, we did capital projects for
Yes.
it, right?
Yes.
You're not gonna have that kind of flexibility in the numbers, right? So the
Unlikely.
only way to fund something like this is through a capital reserve. Not only stadium lighting, I'm talking about other things.
Right, and so we have to start talking about it because it is gonna be complex, right? We're gonna be talking about it with sort of a different kind of language. We wanna do it completely transparently, which takes time. And we also have to deal with, if we have capital reserve projects that are still unfunded, probably.
No, they're funded. I thought we funded. Didn't we say that all the capital projects that we're
No.
doing are funded?
No.
We
No.
still have some on the books that have not been funded.
Oh, yeah,
So
we're
right,
only, like,
okay.
I would say half of of that full cap reserve.
So all,
Roughly.
right, all of this comes colliding together.
4.3 more? So, of this year, yeah.
But all the projects that we're doing that are in the we're doing with the bond, that are in the current capital reserve have been funded. So when we're talking about the nurse's office, the middle school library, that's what I'm talking about.
All the
I'm not talking
coordinated.
about the
But we still
list.
got other.
Yes.
I'm not talking about
Yes.
that list. I'm
Because-
talking
Yes.
about what we specifically agreed to do in connection with the bond.
Yeah, so the
because
pieces all
it worked.
fit, correct. You can't have the car without the wheels and
But we
vice
have other
versa.
things, right, that, people voted on that we have yet to fund. So all of that is important to have the conversation about regardless of where it ends up, on an agenda, in advance, right, in front of the public and not.
But
we
I
gotta-
think,
we gotta have the
I
conversation
think you need to have that conversation sooner than later. I don't think that conversation can wait till next year. You may not put it on till next year,
But you gotta start having some, because it's complex.
but you need to start having that conversation now.
And even review it in construction steering so that everybody's clear about
What we need to
what we've
do,
already voted on that hasn't been it's a,
right.
I can't help but also know that there's a giant unknown. We have that conversation with a giant unknown in front of us. So having that conversation is important. We should be having the conversation and watching the unknown evolve and hopefully crystallize or become clarified and hopefully in a positive manner. But without knowing what's going to happen with LIPA, the actual specifics of it, we are coming up with contingencies and coming up with alternate paths, but we don't know what we can do.
right. But, just like we don't wanna be ahead of the committee, you don't wanna wait so long that you're
Agreed.
behind them every year, You could be in the same position, right?
Right.
You don't want that. That's worst case.
So I think we should put that on as an agenda item. Future capital reserves. At some point, you
Right.
gotta address
And
it.
discuss how we can do it.
I agree. I think it's a good idea. The idea of like having a conceptual conversation about, yes, we have a capital reserve. Yes, we have a budget. Yes, we have a bond. But doesn't mean everything's taken care of. There's a lot that was left out. There's a lot that's going to come up. And how we're going to deal with funding that as a district going forward should be a public, ongoing conversation. And potentially things, improvements like lights, if that's what the community demands from us.
All that. Other old business? New business? I'm definitely just scribbling on anything I might have written down. Motion to adjourn? Thank you, trustees.